LoveLore Library. Chapter 103. Seeing Long Fei Ye's expression, Han Yunxi felt inexplicably uneasy. She took the list and skimmed through it. Her heart almost stopped beating. There were 20 names on the list, but 5 of them were children. The oldest was no more than 10 years old, and all of them were direct descendants of Tianning's noble families. One of them was even an imperial grandson. Compared to this group of people, what did Long Fei Ye's cruelty count for? But that wasn't what shocked Han Yunxi the most. What shocked her the most was the name she was familiar with. Mu Qingwu. Heavens! Mu Qingwu was actually on the list as well. He was someone these female spies wanted to kill in the next 3 years. Han Yunxi had suspected that the person who poisoned Mu Qingwu might be a northerly spy, but that was just a thought. She didn't think too much about it. After all, General Mu's estate held a high position in Tianning country. They controlled military power and had plenty of enemies within the country. She never expected that the poison in Mu Qingwu's body really had been planted by these female spies. In other words, these spies had been lurking around the general's estate for many years. If it wasn't for that chance encounter, no one would have discovered the poison hidden in Mu Qingwu's body. According to the spies' plan, they would continue to poison Mu Qingwu for the next 3 years. Once the 10,000 snake poison accumulated to a certain level, Mu Qingwu would definitely die from the poison. Even Daluo immortals wouldn't be able to save him. Han Yunxi abruptly raised her head and looked at Long Fei Ye in disbelief. Long Fei Ye's playful smile grew wider and wider as he laughed cold. Han Yunxi, your lordship will take you to the Han estate right now. I hope you won't disappoint your lordship. At these words, Han Yunxi's heart gave a jolt as her face turned deathly white. She backed up a few steps, her brows knitted. What do you mean? You were the one who told this prince that you suspected the Han family's third Madam Li. How could you forget this matter so quickly? Long Fei Ye asked. He was very satisfied with the results of today's interrogation, and he was looking forward to the news brought by Han Yunxi. Although he didn't know much about poisons, he knew that the 10,000 snake poison in Mu Qingwu's body was the most unique type. To be able to silently poison Mu Qingwu for so many years, she definitely wasn't an ordinary female spy. Perhaps, they would be able to gain a lot from this trip to the Han clan. Of course, Han Yunxi understood what Long Fei Ye was thinking. She immediately explained, it's not a suspicion. It's just that there might be some clues. Your Highness, please don't have too much hope. Otherwise, you'll be too disappointed. She wasn't defending third concubine, but defending the Han family. Han Konggan's crimes were enough to exterminate the Han family. Fortunately, the previous diagnosis wasn't made public, so she was able to make up for it. This time, if they really found something in the Han family, or if they really found out that there was a spy from Northernly in the Han family, then it would be difficult for the entire Han family to escape this calamity. It had to be known that treason with the enemy was a serious crime that required death. Even if there was a general amnesty, there were clear rules that didn't pardon this crime. The deadline for the bet with Mu Luiyue was approaching. Han Yunxi hoped more than anyone else that they could find something from the clues from Madam Li. However, at this moment, she also hoped more than anyone else that the true culprit of the poison was in the Han family. Not to mention the innocent people in the Han family, just little Yi, alone was enough to make her reluctant to part with him. Even if it's just a possibility. Long Fei Ye raised his brows and smiled. This prince is also very interested. Han Yunxi looked at him with furrowed brows, unable to speak for a long time. If she had known that Long Fei Ye would interrogate this list, she wouldn't have told him about the Han family. She would have thought of a way to investigate first. Only then would she know what to do and how to deal with it. What, esteemed Wang Fei wants to play favoritism? Long Fei asked. It was rare to see this woman so flustered. The playfulness in his eyes deepened. I'm not. Han Yunxi immediately denied. However, when she met Long Fei's scrutinizing gaze, she still avoided it. Let's go before the sun rises. Long Fei pressed on. There was no wall in the world that didn't have a crack. Han Yunxi knew that if Third Madam was really suspected, it wouldn't be able to escape this fellow's eyes. It was only a matter of time before it was discovered. Rather than hiding it now, she might as well say it directly and take precautions. She gritted her teeth and said seriously, Your Highness, I promise that I won't play favoritism. However, can you promise me one thing? Long Fei was a little surprised. He sat back down and asked playfully, Is esteemed Wang Fei negotiating with this prince? From what he understood, Han Yunxi had been abused in the Han family since she was young. She didn't have any feelings for the Han family. If she could even send Han Kongin to the prisons, why would she be reluctant to part with the rest of the Han family? Who did she care so much for? This thought made Long Fei, who was originally in a good mood, suddenly feel a little uncomfortable. Han Yunxi really wanted to answer him yes, but she didn't have the confidence now. She also didn't know if Third Madam was innocent. Your Highness, this concubine is familiar with poisons and can help you. As long as you agree to this concubine's small request, this concubine will do her best to serve your Highness and uncover all the spies. So, you're not negotiating with this prince, but threatening this prince? Long Fei asked back. It was rare for him to be so patient. You! Han Yunxi was angry. Was this guy deliberately making things difficult for her? Seeing that Han Yunxi was angry, Long Fei didn't say anything. His eyes were deep as he looked at her playfully. Han Yunxi hesitated for a long time before speaking again, Your Highness, why don't you listen to my conditions first? It won't be too late to consider them later. Long Fei nodded thoughtfully. Speak. If there really is a spy in the Han family, this concubine begs your Highness to spare the Han family's innocent people. Han Yunxi was very serious. Which innocent people? Long Fei continued to ask. Your Highness, although the Han family only has 3 wives and concubines left, there are still dozens of lives lost. This concubine firmly believes that even if there really is a spy in the Han family, not everyone knows about it. There are still many innocent people, Han Yunxi replied. But Long Fei only laughed. He, Han Yunxi, do you know? If the spy really comes from the Han family, then even you might not be able to escape this calamity. Rather than helping others think of a way out, why not think of your own first? This, Han Yunxi's heart skipped a beat as her mind turned blank. If Long Fei hadn't reminded her, Han Yunxi would have forgotten that she was part of the Han family too. Even if she married into the Duke of Qin's estate, it wouldn't change her birth. Her maternal family would never be able to cut ties with her. Within the Han family, she had the best chance of getting close to the imperial clan and harming them. With Emperor Tianhui's personality, he'd rather kill the wrong person than let it go. As soon as the Han family was proven to be suspicious, she'd be the most dangerous member of the Han family. Seeing Han Yunxi's ashen face, Long Fei's lips curved into a satisfied smile, but it quickly disappeared. His tone was still lofty as ever. If esteemed Wang Fei assists your lordship in finding all the spies, your lordship can consider it and vouch for you. Seeing Long Fei's damned indifferent expression, Han Yunxi wanted to hit someone. But what could she do? Imperial families were the most heartless. Brothers could turn against each other, and blood relatives could kill each other. Innocent outsiders were nothing in their eyes. It wasn't Long Fei who was cruel, but the dynasty itself. Long Fei had only reminded her of this point out of the kindness of his heart. At the same time, Long Fei Yi had reminded her that only supreme power and influence could save her from such cruelty. Power and influence. She was dependent on Long Fei Yi, but the Han family had long lost its power and influence. If there really was a spy in the Han family, then they could only blame that hateful spy for implicating an innocent family. Han Yunxi knew she couldn't change this fact, so she could only go with the flow. She raised her head to look at Long Fei Yi and said timidly, "If your highness wants to consider it, then, could you consider vouching for one more person?" "Who?" Long Fei Yi immediately asked. "My younger brother, Han Yunyi." "He's only 6 years old and doesn't understand anything," Han Yunxi replied hastily. Long Fei Yi seemed surprised by her words and remained silent for a long time. "Your Highness, you just angrily accused the female spy of murdering a young child. This concubine knows that your Highness cares for the young and weak, so you must be a kind person." Han Yunxi was at a loss for words when it came to flattery. She would never say such things, but for she was willing to risk it all. Long Fei Yi didn't expect Han Yunxi to say such words. He was kind. Did this woman's flattery hit the nail on the head? "Is that so?" Long Fei Yi asked with a sneer. "Yes." Han Yunxi felt a bit guilty herself. Who knew that Long Fei Yi would actually agree? "All right, this prince can promise you." Han Yunxi was very surprised. This guy agreed just like that. So simple. She thought he would make things difficult for her again. What was wrong with this guy today? Could it be that he was in a good mood because of the results of the interrogation? Really? Han Yunxi had to confirm. Long Fei stood up and retorted, "Are you questioning your lordship's integrity?" Han Yunxi immediately shook her head, not daring to waste any more words. "Many thanks, Your Highness Duke of Qin. Can we leave now?" Long Fei Yi asked again. Han Yunxi immediately nodded and hurriedly turned to leave. Forgetting that her foot was injured, she suddenly stomped on the ground. "Aw!" She cried out in pain, her little face contorted. It hurt. She only felt the pain coming from her foot, and it was so painful that her scalp went numb. Long Fei Yi glanced down, but didn't see her foot. He didn't ask any questions, and just like before, he squatted down slightly in front of her. This guy's lean and muscular body, tall and slender figure, even if he was squatting slightly, he gave off a proud and noble feeling. Han Yunxi suddenly felt an indescribable sense of security. Just as she was about to carefully climb onto him, Long Fei Yi unexpectedly said, "It's almost dawn. Hurry up." Without a doubt, this cold urging dispelled that inexplicable sense of security that Han Yunxi felt. Her lips curved into a cold smile, and she brazenly climbed onto Long Fei Yi's shoulder, not caring if he was in pain or not. Sense of security. What a joke. If this guy didn't sell her off, she would be secretly laughing. When they left Solitary Garden, the sky was already gray and wasn't as dark as before. It should be dawn in another 3 hours. Long Fei Yi's speed was especially fast, so fast that Han Yunxi couldn't see her surroundings clearly. She only felt that the houses on both sides were like shadows flitting past. At this time, the wind was already cold, and Long Fei Yi's speed was also fast. Han Yunxi only felt that the wind was whistling in her face, and it was especially painful when it scraped against her face. Helpless, she could only bury her head on Long Fei Yi's back and let him block the wind for her. She pressed her head against the back of his neck. Long Fei Yi, who was focused on speeding, suddenly felt a bump on the back of his neck. It was especially uncomfortable, but he frowned and didn't say anything. Chapter 104. There was some distance between the solitary enclosure and the Han estate. No matter how fast Long Fei Yi was, it would still take some time. After a while, Han Yunxi started to feel uncomfortable, and her neck began to ache. She lifted her head, and the howling wind blew against her face again. Her long hair flew around, and her face hurt like it was being cut by a knife. Han Yunxi lowered her head again, but she quickly lifted it again. If she kept her head down like this, her neck would probably be stiff by the time they arrived at the Han estate. Long Fei Yi was naturally aware of the small movements of the person on his back, but he continued to stare straight ahead, as if he was used to it. But, this was the first time His Highness Duke of Qin was carrying someone on his back. After a long time, Han Yunxi's neck finally couldn't take it anymore. She was already tired from not sleeping the entire night, and now after being on Long Fei Ye's back for so long, she was exhausted. She hesitated for a moment, then with a sneaky expression, she secretly licked her lips. The hand that was originally holding onto Long Fei Ye's shoulder carefully reached out and slowly wrapped around Long Fei Ye's neck. Once she hugged him, Han Yunxi didn't dare to move. Seeing that Long Fei Yi didn't have any reaction, she timidly rejoiced. It was much easier to hug his arm like this. Her eyes darted around, and she licked her lips again. She tried to carefully turn her head to the side, pressing her small face against his shoulder. Of course, her movements were still stiff. Previously, when Long Fei Yi had taken her to kill the poisonous mosquitoes, it was Long Fei Yi who had domineeringly held her in his arms. But now, she was the one who took the initiative to get close. Would this guy think that she was fickle and didn't abide by the virtues of a wife? When she thought of his previous warning, Han Yunxi felt gloomy. Pedantic ancient people, Han Yunxi waited for a while, but didn't hear any dissatisfaction from Long Fei Yi. She thought that this guy was so fast that he probably couldn't take care of her. At this moment, her tense nerves finally relaxed. She didn't even know what she was feeling guilty about. She secretly sighed in relief and muttered to herself, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, my apologies. I don't have any other intentions. I just wanted to lean on your shoulder for a moment." Long Fei Ye's furrowed brows only loosened after the people behind him calmed down. From beginning to end, he remained calm and collected, but the light in his eyes grew deeper and deeper. There was a shadow at the bottom of his eyes, bright and dark, making it difficult for others to see through him. The entire journey was silent. There was only the sound of the wind whistling past, and the thumping, heartbeats that neither of them was aware of. When they arrived at the Han residence, the sky was still dark. The sun always rose late in the winter. Han Yunxi pointed the way, and Long Fei Yi quickly and quietly landed on Third Madam's roof with her. Although she received Long Fei Ye's promise, Han Yunxi still didn't want to find any clues in Third Madam's room. It was best if the Han family didn't get involved. There would always be a way to find clues elsewhere. The Han family's courtyards were mostly the same. Based on her previous memories, Han Yunxi had a rough idea of the layout of Third Madam's courtyard. It was similar to a small courtyard house. At this moment, the courtyard was completely silent. No one had gotten up yet. However, Han Yunxi knew that her old mama would get up in less than 2 hours. "Can you tell me what the clue is now?" Long Fei Yi asked in a low voice. Han Yunxi concisely recounted the spring tea she drank in Third Madam's courtyard that day, as well as her discovery in the small wooden hut. Long Fei Yi was a smart person and immediately understood. It wasn't strange for snake venom to appear in Third Madam's small wooden hut. However, it just so happened that the snake venom had been replaced. This was a bit suspicious. "So, I want to search the entire courtyard to see if there are any traces of other snake venom," Han Yunxi said seriously. The reason she was able to discover the snake venom in the small wooden hut was because the snake venom's toxicity was stronger than normal poisons. The detoxification system was more sensitive to it. The second reason was because the 2 drawers of the medicine cabinet hadn't been cleaned. Previously, Han Yunxi had hoped to find traces of other snake venom in this courtyard. Now, she truly didn't hope for that anymore. This clue is suspicious, but it's not very suspicious, Long Fei Yi said very objectively. Of course, Han Yunxi understood. I hope I'm just overthinking it. As soon as these words came out, a mocking sneer appeared on Long Fei Yi's lips. Seeing this, Han Yunxi was especially displeased. Take me down, she said coldly. Her tone carried an element of command. Long Fei Yi stared blankly as he met her angry eyes. For some reason, he didn't bicker with her. He landed with her in his arms and quietly pried open the door. Han Yunxi saw his nimble and experienced movements as he opened the door and couldn't help but sigh in her heart. This guy was the high and mighty Duke of Qin, but his potential as a thief was actually so good. Needless to say, if it wasn't for Long Fei Yi, Han Yunxi really wouldn't have been able to enter. As soon as the door was pushed open, Han Yunxi limped in. Long Fei Yi followed closely behind and quietly closed the door, leaving no trace behind. As soon as they entered, they arrived at the guest hall. Although it wasn't very likely that there would be traces of snake venom here, Han Yunxi still limped around in a circle and activated the detoxification system to search. Long Fei Yi was like a door god. He stood by the door and watched Han Yunxi's slowly moving figure in the dark. If Han Yunxi's hands and feet were nimble, she would be able to walk around very quickly. However, her foot was injured, so it was inevitable that she would be delayed. Fortunately, she had the detoxification system. Otherwise, if she really had to rely on manual search, she would probably have to trouble Long Fei Yi to accompany her several times. Very quickly, they searched all of Third Madam's courtyard but didn't find anything. Only Third Madam and Han Ruoshua's bedroom was left. At this time, the mother and daughter were both sleeping. Nothing. Long Fei Yi was clearly a bit disappointed. There are still 2 bedrooms. Let's continue searching. Han Yunxi said lightly, but her heart was secretly delighted. 2 or 3 snake venoms must be a coincidence. She must be thinking too much. Long Fei Yi didn't ask any more questions. He walked with Han Yunxi to Han Ruoshua's bedroom. A woman's boudoir was indeed different. As soon as they arrived at the door, they could smell a faint fragrance. Long Fei Yi hesitated for a moment and said in a low voice, "We'll come back when the sun rises." Han Yunxi looked at the sky and said seriously, "There's still time. We won't have to make another trip." First, Han Yunxi had a bet on her and didn't have that much time to waste. Second, if she didn't figure out what was going on, she wouldn't be able to sleep when she returned. There were no traces of snake venom anywhere. It was very likely that she was thinking too much. However, it was also very likely that the snake venom was hidden in the bedroom. Long Fei Yi was about to speak when Han Yunxi took out something similar to sandalwood from her medical bag. She carefully lit it, poked a hole in the paper window, and reached in. Don't say that sleeping incense was a despicable method, but it was always very useful at critical times. Han Yunxi calculated the time and laughed at Long Fei Yi. "Your Highness, pry open the door." No matter how Long Fei heard this, he only found it odd. Actually, if he wanted to investigate Third Madam, he could simply come here in broad daylight. Even if he turned the entire house upside down and left, no one would notice. He really had to be crazy to bring this woman here in the middle of the night to do such a thing. He pried open the door expressionlessly. Seeing Han Yunxi enter, he didn't move. He stood in the same place and didn't even look inside. He always avoided women's rooms. Moreover, there was someone sleeping inside. Han Ruoshua was already asleep, and with the addition of the sleeping incense, it would be difficult for her to wake up no matter how loud the commotion was. Han Yunxi looked around before finally coming to the bed to investigate. Lifting the curtain, she saw that Han Ruoshua's sleeping posture was not good at all. The spring scenery was a complete mess. Han Yunxi unconsciously turned to look outside the door. She thought that Long Fei Yi not coming in seemed to be the right thing to do. She didn't know whether to say it was regretful or fortunate. She didn't find any clues in Han Ruoshua's room. Now, only third Madame Li was left. Han Yunxi didn't dare to look at Long Fei Yi's face. She thought that this guy should be so disappointed that his good mood for the night was about to disappear, right? Han Yunxi did the same as before. She first used the sleeping incense to knock Madame Li unconscious before opening the door. Long Fei Yi was still standing outside the door. Although he was standing, he was closely watching the movements around him. If third Madame Li was a traitor, then this courtyard was far from as simple as it looked. At the very least, there would be guards roaming around in secret. Madame Li's room was much bigger than Han Ruoshua's, and this was the most suspicious place. Han Yunxi was very serious in her search. She was completely focused on the task, not wanting to miss a single clue. However, after a serious search, the detoxification system didn't give any hints. Finally, Han Yunxi's gaze landed on the bed. That was the last place in the entire courtyard that hadn't been searched yet. Third Madam, you definitely didn't use the 10,000 snake poison. Han Yunxi muttered to herself as she walked over step by step. If Long Fei Yi had followed her in, perhaps he would have already noticed that something was wrong. Unfortunately, Long Fei Yi was currently outside the door. Han Yunxi approached the bed step by step. How could she, who didn't know martial arts, detect the terrifying murderous aura in the curtain? Third Madam woke up as soon as she smelled the sleeping incense. At this moment, she was holding a sharp dagger in her hand. Third Madam's face was malicious and sinister. She was very different from her usual self. When she heard the voice talking to herself, she knew that it was Han Yunxi. She didn't think that Han Yunxi would really suspect her and actually dare to infiltrate the Han family to investigate her. What right did this girl have to suspect her? Could it be that she really found some clues in the small wooden house that day? The 3 drawers that she opened did indeed contain snake poison. However, they had already been cleaned and no scent was left behind. How did she find out? This girl was able to cure Mu Qingwu's 10,000 snake poison, so her poison skills shouldn't be bad. However, no matter how powerful a poison master was, they wouldn't be able to smell the residual scent of the 3 snake poisons. Third Madam was full of confusion, but at this time, she didn't have time to think so much. She hadn't even made a move yet, but this damned girl wanted to gain the initiative by striking first. Very well, she'll help her today. If Han Yunxi died here, no one would know. With one less detoxification expert in Tianning's imperial clan, she could save herself a lot of trouble. Thinking up to here, the killing intent in Third Madam's eyes grew stronger. Han Yunxi stopped in front of the curtain. If she didn't have the detoxification system, she wouldn't have investigated so carefully. But with the detoxification system in hand, she couldn't miss a single trace, including Third Madam's hands. She didn't want to find anything, but she had her principles. Since she'd promised the Long Fei Yi, she had to be serious to the end. She focused her mind and all her concentration to increase the detoxification system's sensitivity. Behind the curtain, Third Madam's cold phoenix eyes narrowed. She held the dagger in one hand and grabbed the curtain with the other. Han Yunxi raised her hand and grabbed the curtain as well. She was about to lift it when a cold voice suddenly came from outside the door. Han Yunxi, are you done yet? Hearing this, Han Yunxi subconsciously turned her head. Behind the curtain, Third Madam suddenly felt a chill in her heart. Of course she recognized this cold, emotionless voice. It was him, Long Fei Yi. Chapter 105. Long Fei Yi. It was actually Long Fei Yi. Third concubine had never seen Long Fei Yi in person, but they had already formed a deep grudge. In the past 2 months, Long Fei Yi had killed many of her subordinates. Even her eldest disciple, who could control poisonous mosquito swarms, had died at his hands. How could she not hate him? Third concubine wished she could rush out and fight Long Fei Yi to the death. However, she was naturally rational. She knew very well that she couldn't. She couldn't kill this man. Once she was exposed, Northern Li's years of hard work would all go to waste. She had been wondering why the guards hidden in the dark didn't make a move when Han Yunxi barged in. Now she finally understood. It turned out that Long Fei Yi had come. The guards were right not to make a move. Once they made a move, she would never be able to shake off suspicion. However, what she didn't understand was why Long Fei Yi was with Han Yunxi. Didn't he look down on this woman? Could it be that from the moment Han Yunxi cured Mu Qing's poison, she had gained Long Fei Yi's recognition? Furthermore, Han Yunxi, who was proficient in poisons, had helped Long Fei Yi in the investigation of the traitor. Therefore, Long Fei Yi, who knew nothing about poisons, was able to kill her eldest disciple? So, the culprit was Han Yunxi. Thinking of this, third concubine's grip on the dagger tightened. Northern Li had spent many years training this group of traitors to guard against Long Fei Yi. Unexpectedly, they had been in hiding for many years. Just as they were about to start reaping the rewards, Han Yunxi had actually stepped in and disrupted all their plans. And now, they had actually found her. Han Yunxi, if I don't kill you, I, Li Mingyue, swear I'm not human. Forced by the situation, Li Mingyue had no choice but to suppress her belly full of anger. She quietly withdrew the dagger and lay back on her side. Soon. Han Yunxi replied to Long Fei Yi and abruptly lifted the curtain. She checked the entire bed and moved closer to third concubine to check her hand. The detoxification system still did not alert her. Phew, Han Yunxi heaved a huge sigh of relief. Her heart that had been hanging in the air all night was finally at ease. None of them. That's great. She gently patted Li Mingyue through the blanket and smiled. Third concubine, I've offended you. After that, he carefully tucked Li Mingyue in, put down the curtain, and left. However, when she heard the door close, Li Mingyue opened her eyes. Her face was terrifyingly gloomy. Great. Hee, Han Yunxi, I will definitely let you know what is truly good. As soon as Han Yunxi went out, Long Fei Yi saw her expression and guessed what had happened. However, he still asked, how is it? Nothing at all. Your Highness, I think we have misunderstood. Han Yunxi smiled. She was in a good mood. Not being able to find any other traces doesn't completely prove that there is no suspicion. Long Fei Yi's voice deepened. He was very dissatisfied. The 3 snake venoms in the wooden house are the most common. It's not surprising that they appeared here. Han Yunxi immediately defended herself. Then, she continued, of course, if your highness still has doubts, you can ask third concubine whether or not the snake venom was let go, and why. Han Yunxi had wanted to ask third concubine directly when she came to drink tea earlier. However, she thought that it might alert the enemy, so she decided to test it first. Now that nothing was found, there was nothing to worry about. Long Fei Yi was about to speak when the sound of water came from not far away. It seemed that the servants had woken up. Let's go. Without another word, Long Fei Yi immediately grabbed Han Yunxi and leaped onto the roof. In a moment, their figures disappeared into the dusky sky without a sound. When Long Fei Yi and Han Yunxi returned to the hibiscus courtyard of the Duke of Qin's manor, the sun had already risen. Although Long Fei Yi was not very happy on the way back, he still remembered Han Yunxi's foot injury. He sent Han Yunxi to Leisurely Cloud Pavilion, placed her in the drawing room, and had her sit on the table. At this moment, Zhao Mama came in with water. When she saw this scene, she subconsciously took 2 steps back. However, after hesitating for a moment, she still walked in with a smile and bowed. "This servant greets your highness and her ladyship." Long Fei Yi nodded and indicated for her to rise. Zhao Mama stood up and hurriedly poured 2 cups of tea. She glanced up at the loft and smiled. "Your highness and her ladyship woke up so early." When these words came out, Han Yunxi almost spat out the tea in her mouth. What did Zhao Mama mean? Did she misunderstand that Long Fei Yi stayed here last night? Obviously, Long Fei Yi also understood the meaning of these words. He lightly coughed a few times and lowered his head to drink his tea without saying a word. "Your highness, her ladyship, please wait a moment. This servant will go prepare breakfast," Zhao Mama hurriedly said and turned to leave. However, Long Fei Yi spoke at this time. "No need. This prince still has matters to attend to. No matter how busy your highness is, you should still eat breakfast. Don't starve yourself," Zhao Mama advised. However, Long Fei Yi stood up and didn't pay much attention to Zhao Mama. He said to Han Yunxi, "Don't act rashly and alert the enemy. This prince has his own arrangements, understand?" Actually, Han Yunxi had tried to persuade Long Fei Yi along the way, but he still wanted to investigate. "You, stop here." Long Fei Yi's voice deepened. He had carried this woman on his back and listened to her chatter by his ear the entire way back. His patience had basically run out. Han Yunxi pursed her lips and could only remain silent. Long Fei Yi seemed to be afraid that she would act rashly, so he gave her a meaningful look before turning to leave. Once he left, Han Yunxi rolled her eyes. Although she couldn't accept Long Fei Yi's decision emotionally, logically speaking, she still agreed that this matter should be investigated. After all, the traitor was hidden very well. As long as there was even the slightest bit of suspicion, they couldn't let it go. Han family. She didn't know what the fate of the Han family would be like. "Esteemed Princess Consort, why didn't you ask His Highness to stay for breakfast?" Zhao Mama asked. Han Yunxi recovered her senses and replied without thinking, "Why did you ask him to stay?" Zhao Mama was suddenly at a loss for words. She didn't know what was going on. No reason. "This servant will go prepare breakfast now," Zhao Mama said and quickly retreated. She sighed in her heart. These 2 masters' thoughts were too hard to read. Looking at Zhao Mama's back, Han Yunxi's stomach suddenly grumbled. She couldn't remind her that she was hungry. Once she was reminded, her stomach would immediately feel hungry. Han Yunxi was suspicious and carefully jumped down from the table. When her feet touched the ground, she remembered that she had left her shoes and socks in the solitary courtyard. She limped towards the warm couch and lazily lay down, letting out a sigh of relief. Last night, she seemed to have done a lot of things. However, she felt that time had passed very quickly. She had to admit that she still hadn't recovered her senses yet. She didn't know if that guy was hungry or not. What was he busy with so early in the morning? Was he going to protect the people on the list last night? In her impression, there were still a lot of people on the list who were still alive. No matter how busy he was, eating wouldn't take too much time. Han Yunxi's eyes flashed with a sense of loss that she didn't even notice. She curled her lips and didn't want to think about that guy. Who was the head of the northernly country spies? Could it be that they knew him and that he was hiding by their side? As Han Yunxi mused and pondered, she unknowingly fell asleep. Zhao Mama came to deliver breakfast. Seeing her tired appearance, she didn't dare to disturb her. Thus, Han Yunxi slept until the afternoon, until Mu Qingwu came to see her. Mu Qingwu's work efficiency was pretty good. In a few days, he had investigated and sorted out a detailed investigation report. It recorded in detail the people who had been in contact with him for the past 3 years, as well as the things that had happened. Han Yunxi slept for a while and was completely awake. She silently looked at the investigation report and didn't miss a single piece of information. There were a lot of people recorded in this report. There were 5 good friends of Mu Qingwu, 4 male cousins of Mu Qingwu, 2 female cousins, and the last one, which was also the most conspicuous one, Mu Luiyue. Although Han Yunxi never deliberately excluded Mu Luiyue, when she saw this name, she couldn't help but smile. She had to admit that Mu Qingwu was really a wonderful person. "You really wrote your blood-related little sister down?" Han Yunxi teasingly asked. "The Princess Consort said that the person who poisoned me had borrowed the hands of others. Not to mention my blood-related little sister, even if there was a need, I would still write my father's name down." Mu Qingwu had thick eyebrows and large eyes. His eyes sparkled and he looked very serious when he was serious. Han Yunxi's heart was filled with admiration. She nodded and continued looking. In the report, there was a detailed note behind each person's name. It recorded the frequency of contact with Mu Qingwu, the location of the meeting, and the specific things that had happened. After Han Yunxi finished looking over the names, she started from the first one and carefully looked over them one by one. While she was looking, she teasingly asked, "Young general, this is your private matter. As long as you can help find the traitor, even if the princess consort wants to see the military secrets, you can ask the emperor for permission." Mu Qingwu was still very serious. "Don't. I don't want to know." Han Yunxi quickly refused. She understood that the more she knew, the more dangerous it would be. Han Yunxi looked and gradually became serious. Mu Qingwu waited on the side, not daring to make a sound. When he inadvertently raised his head and saw Han Yunxi's serious face, he couldn't look away. Since the first time he saw this woman in front of the Duke of Qin's manor, he knew that this woman wasn't simple. Only, he never thought that they would have so many interactions. He always thought that if she didn't marry into the Duke of Qin's manor, perhaps they wouldn't even have any interactions. Han Yunxi was focused on the report, so how could she know that Mu Qingwu was staring at her from the side? She looked over all the records one by one. Most of them didn't have anything suspicious. When friends invited each other, they mostly drank. The 10,000 snake poison definitely couldn't be put in wine. She was certain of this point. Moreover, the drinking frequency wasn't high. As for the interactions between the cousins, although they were frequent, there wasn't any pattern. Most of the time, they just visited the manor. In the end, Han Yunxi's gaze fell on Mu Luiyue's information. It had to be said that Mu Luiyue and Mu Qingwu's interactions were the most frequent. Basically, when Mu Qingwu returned to the great general's estate, he would see his sister. This was all very normal. However, there was one record that caught Han Yunxi's attention. Tea. Mu Luiyue actually invited Mu Qingwu to the outskirts of the Heavenly Fragrance tea house from time to time for tea. Han Yunxi suddenly raised her head to look at Mu Qingwu. At the same time, Mu Qingwu was also staring at her. In that instant, their eyes met and their gazes met. Mu Qingwu was like a thief who had been caught at the scene. He immediately lowered his head in guilt. However, Han Yunxi was alarmed and didn't notice his abnormality. She anxiously asked, "Young general, does your sister often invite you to tea?" Mu Qingwu's ears were a little hot. He had never been so embarrassed in his life. He also didn't know what was wrong with him. He raised his head with difficulty and answered, "Yes, once or twice a month. It's the Heavenly Fragrance tea house in the outskirts of the city. Luiyue is a frequent customer there. Once or twice a month." Han Yunxi was suspicious. Once or twice a month. This frequency was different from the frequency of poisoning. The difference was too great. Do you buy tea from there? Han Yunxi asked again. She knew that most people who went to the tea house would buy tea leaves back. Chapter 106. Mu Luiyue had often invited Mu Qinggu to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House for tea these past few years, but the frequency wasn't high, so it didn't match the frequency of poisoning. However, most people who drank tea would buy tea from the tea house, so the tea leaves they bought would naturally be brewed every day. The focus was originally on the tea leaves, but hearing Mu Qinggu's words, Han Yunxi paid even more attention. Mu Qinggu recalled for a moment, then seriously said, usually, they would bring back a lot of tea leaves. The tea leaves there are much better than other places, and there are many unique varieties. Han Yunxi thoughtfully nodded. She had previously checked the tea leaves that Mu Qinggu had left at home and the military camp, but there was no poison. Last time, the tea leaves that I checked, were they also bought from the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? Han Yunxi asked again. Han Yunxi had already asked this, so if Mu Qinggu still didn't realize that there was a problem with the tea leaves, then he would be an idiot. Esteemed Wang Fei, you suspect that they poisoned the tea leaves? Mu Qinggu suspiciously asked. I can only say that the tea leaves cannot be ruled out. They are much more suspicious than other things. Han Yunxi truthfully said. Mu Qinggu knitted his handsome brows and seriously pondered. After a while, he explained in detail, I'm quite picky when it comes to tea leaves. The tea from the military camp was all brought by my family. The tea at home, some of it was given by friends, and some of it was given by Luiyue. Mu Qinggu said and smiled, I didn't buy much myself. Han Yunxi also smiled. Generally speaking, people who drank tea didn't buy tea, and people who bought tea didn't drink tea. Mu Qinggu was a noble young general, so how many people were lining up to give him good tea? If this 10,000 snake poison wasn't a slow-acting poison, it would take a long time for it to be administered slowly. She estimated that it wouldn't be easy for them to find clues among the tea leaves that were given by so many people. Fortunately, the poison had a frequency, and they could follow the frequency as a clue. There was no need for Han Yunxi to ask. Mu Qinggu already knew. He added, the tea given by an outsider is not fixed, so we can basically rule it out. When he said this, he was shocked. He looked at Han Yunxi abruptly and said in a louder voice, could it be Luiyue? Han Yunxi already had her suspicions, but she just couldn't say it out loud. Since Mu Qinggu had said it himself, she didn't have to be polite. If the problem really lies with the tea leaves, she's the biggest suspect. Mu Qinggu's face turned pale when he heard this, but he didn't deny anything. Han Yunxi understood his dilemma and said faintly, young general, it's just a speculation now. We have to confirm that the tea leaves are poisonous before we can make further speculations. Of course, I believe that your sister absolutely doesn't have the intention to harm you. I'm just afraid that she's being used by someone. After all, she was his biological sister. No matter how straightforward and upright Mu Qinggu was, he still had feelings. When he heard Han Yunxi's words, he raised his head again. Don't worry, Princess Consort. This one will do his best to cooperate with your investigation. With these words, Han Yunxi was still relieved. She personally poured a cup of tea for Mu Qinggu and continued to ask, young general, think about it seriously. Do you still have tea leaves in your house that haven't been checked? Mu Qinggu didn't think about it. He was very sure. No. Then, do you still have the jar of tea leaves that you drank before? Han Yunxi asked again. Her delicate eyebrows were slightly knitted, just like her expression when she was detoxifying the poison, very serious. Mu Qinggu still shook his head. He had high expectations for tea leaves. Most of the time, the tea leaves would be thrown away before he finished drinking them. This was because even if the tea leaves were well preserved, the taste would still change after a long time. Then, how long will young General drink a jar of tea leaves? Han Yunshi asked curiously. That's not certain. Different tea leaves have different ways of preservation and time. The longest is 2 months, and the shortest is more than 10 days. Mu Qingwu answered truthfully. Han Yunshi nodded and memorized it in her heart. Then she asked, does young General remember what tea leaves your sister sent over? What kind of tea leaves were most of them? Where did they come from? Since they had confirmed this clue, they naturally had to investigate it closely and not let go of any possibility. Mu Qingwu recalled as he answered, she sent over a variety of tea leaves. As long as there was spring, summer, and autumn tea leaves, she would send them over. Occasionally, she would also send over some flower tea. Flower tea. Han Yunshi didn't understand. Normally, only women would drink flower tea. Strictly speaking, flower tea wasn't tea. Seeing Han Yunshi's suspicion, Mu Qingwu knew that she had misunderstood and hurriedly explained, it should be floral green tea. She used the natural fragrance of flowers to smoke the tea leaves, so that the tea leaves would have a floral fragrance. When brewed, it would have a floral fragrance. As soon as he said this, Han Yunshi became alert. There was no doubt that the fragrance of this kind of flower tea could hide the smell of many poisons. Does young General remember what kinds of tea leaves he often drinks? Han Yunshi asked. Mu Qingwu thought for a moment, asked for a pen and paper, and wrote down all the tea leaves that Mu Luiyue had sent over. Once he wrote it down, it was clear at a glance. Among the tea leaves that Mu Luiyue had sent over, the most was green tea, followed by floral green tea, and black tea was the least. White tea and black tea were only sent once or twice. How long can green tea and floral green tea be preserved generally? Han Yunshi continued to ask. Green tea can be preserved for more than a month. If it's preserved well, it can be preserved for 1.5 months. Floral green tea can be preserved for up to 2 months. Mu Qingwu replied. From the looks of it, based on the frequency of poisoning, the target was green tea and floral green tea. Han Yunshi's lips curled into a smile as she asked, did your sister buy all these tea leaves from the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? Mu Qingwu nodded, most of them are from the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. The tea cans all have the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House's logo. However, there are also some that don't have a logo. They should have been given to her by someone else. Given to her by someone else. This matter was a little more troublesome. Han Yunshi wasn't in a hurry. She slowly looked through the clues one by one. She glanced outside and saw that it was already late. If she went out at this time, it would probably be dark by the time she reached the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. Young General, how about we go to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House tomorrow morning? I'll listen to esteemed Wang Fei's arrangements. Mu Qingwu was very easy to discuss. Even though there were many matters to attend to in the military, he didn't dare to delay this matter. First, it concerned his own life. Second, His Highness Duke of Qin was watching closely. After arranging a departure time for the next day, Mu Qingwu took his leave. However, Han Yunshi wasn't idle. Green tea, floral green tea, she muttered to herself as she dove into the study. She didn't come out even when the sky was dark. Zhao Mama paced back and forth in front of the study several times, hesitating whether or not she should knock on the door. This mistress hadn't eaten breakfast, lunch, or even lunch. The sky was already dark and it was almost time for dinner. Zhao Mama couldn't help but bring the food to the door. Zhao Mama was about to knock on the door when Long Fei Yi came in unexpectedly. Seeing this, Zhao Mama put the food to the side and hurried over. She bowed respectfully, "Your Highness." Long Fei Yi was travel-worn. He had probably been busy the whole day. He swept a glance around the room and said in a cold voice, "Where is she?" Zhao Mama clearly knew who he was asking about, but she deliberately played dumb. "Is Your Highness asking about, esteemed Wang Fei?" Long Fei Ye's voice suddenly turned cold, but he still said the same two simple words, "Where is she?" Zhao Mama didn't dare to play dumb and hurriedly replied, "Esteemed Wang Fei is in the study." Zhao Mama thought he would go over and was about to talk about dinner when Long Fei Yi casually threw a package to her. His tone was very unfriendly. "Give it to her. Tell her to look after it well. It's not something that should be thrown around." It was a small thing wrapped in a brocade cloth. Zhao Mama held it in her hand and secretly touched it. She didn't know what was inside. Of course, she didn't dare to ask too much. She replied, "Yes." Long Fei Yi seemed to want to say something else, but he only pursed his lips and got up to leave without saying a word. "Your Highness, please wait." Zhao Mama called him back. Long Fei Yi looked over and didn't even open his golden mouth. He really was a man who cherished his words like gold. Zhao Mama had long gotten used to it. Her eyes flashed with a secret smile as she said, "Your Highness, it's getting late. Why don't you have dinner here?" "No need." Long Fei Yi refused without a second thought. Aside from necessary banquets, he didn't have the habit of eating with others. Even when it came to Grand Concubine Yi, he'd tactfully declined. But Zhao Mama only sighed softly and said helplessly, "Your Highness, esteemed Wang Fei's been in the study all day. She hasn't eaten any of the 3 meals a day. This old woman can't persuade her otherwise, but perhaps esteemed Wang Fei will listen to the Wang Ye's words." Long Fei Ye's deep eyes flashed with displeasure as he glanced at the study door. Zhao Mama had served His Highness for many years and knew his temper well. He had to have his own ideas, or else he'd have left long ago. Zhao Mama couldn't help but feel expectant, but Long Fei Yi stared for a while before saying cold, "It's her business that she doesn't eat. It has nothing to do with your lordship. There's no need to report this in the future." All right, Zhao Mama wasn't surprised, but a little disappointed. But Long Fei Yi had hardly finished speaking when there was a creak as the door to the study opened. Han Yinxi's face was expressionless as she openly walked out. Since when had she been in the study all day? She'd been sleeping for most of the day, all right. Since when had she not eaten any of the 3 meals a day? She'd been so busy that she'd forgotten to eat, all right. She'd never mistreated herself. As soon as she felt hungry, she'd immediately go out to look for food. Who knew that just as she was about to open the door, she'd hear Zhao Mama's complaint. Then, she'd heard Long Fei Ye's heartless words. What a heartless bastard. Han Yinxi's sudden appearance surprised Zhao Mama and Long Fei Yi. Zhao Mama was extremely embarrassed, afraid that her words would be exposed. However, Han Yinxi wasn't that bored. Her foot still hurt, so she limped over and bowed. "Your Highness." Long Fei Yi squeezed out a word from the corner of his mouth. He didn't know why he was so uncomfortable. Han Yinxi stood up and turned to ask, "Zhao Mama, I'm hungry. Can you call for food?" As she spoke, she walked towards the side hall without even looking at Long Fei Yi. Long Fei Yi frowned again. Seeing this, Zhao Mama couldn't help but swallow her saliva. She didn't dare to say anything and could only lower her head and slip away from the side to deliver the food. Long Fei Yi was left hanging in the living room, with no one to serve him. Zhao Mama carried the fragrant food, but didn't dare to walk past him. She purposely took a detour to the side hall to deliver the food. Han Yinxi was starving. Once the food was served, she began to eat heartily. Who knew that she'd only eaten a few mouthfuls when something wrapped in brocade was thrown in from outside and landed in front of her. She turned back and saw Long Fei's icy face as he walked in. Chapter 107. Long Fei Yi lifted his robes and sat down in front of Han Yunxi. Cold, he said, Zhao Mama, add another pair of chopsticks. This prince will be having dinner here tonight. Hearing that His Highness was staying for dinner, Zhao Mama was naturally delighted. She immediately added more chopsticks and bowls as she said with a smile, Your Highness, please wait a moment. This servant will go to the kitchens to add a few more dishes, as well as a jug of Your Highness's favorite grape wine. Unfortunately, neither Long Fei Yi nor Han Yunxi paid any attention to her. The two of them were currently staring at each other. When Zhao Mama saw that the atmosphere wasn't right, she immediately shut her mouth and resentfully slipped away. Han Yunxi looked at Long Fei Yi for a moment before her gaze moved down and landed on the small bundle on the table. She deliberately put down her chopsticks and asked unhappily, Your Highness, it's not good for you to just throw this thing around, right? No matter what it was, even if he wanted to give it to her, he shouldn't throw it over like this. So rude. This is indeed not something that can be casually thrown around. It's best if you keep it well. Don't let this prince see it a second time. Long Fei Yi warned. When these words came out, Han Yunxi was puzzled. Could it be that this bundle contained her things? My things? She asked suspiciously. A trace of disdain appeared on Long Fei Yi's lips, but he didn't reply. Han Yunxi hurriedly took it and carefully opened it. Who knew that what greeted her eyes was actually her shoes and socks. One shoe and one sock, which were the ones she took off in Solitary Park last night. Last night, her feet had been bandaged with medicine and they were so swollen that she couldn't wear shoes and socks, so she could only go barefoot. She had completely forgotten about these things. Who knew that Long Fei Yi would actually bring them back for her? Although these things couldn't be casually thrown around, it wasn't enough for him to throw them over with a dark face. Although her heart was dissatisfied, Han Yunxi was still very polite. Many thanks to Your Highness. Qinxie will remember. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi asked coldly, So, that night, you didn't wear shoes, went into the prison barefoot, and went to the Han family barefoot? The ancients were conservative, and this man was simply an antique among the conservatives. Who cared whether she was barefoot or not? He was not her real husband, so he was too nosy. Han Yunxi answered honestly, yes. As soon as he said this, Long Fei Yi suddenly frowned and narrowed his eyes dangerously. Han Yunxi didn't want to pay attention to him. However, being stared at by him, she felt a murderous aura around her. Good women don't fight with old men. She hurriedly explained, Qinxie's feet are wrapped in thick gauze, so I can't wear shoes and socks. As she spoke, she was afraid that this fellow wouldn't believe her, so she hurriedly kicked him and lifted her skirt. If you don't believe me, look. Long Fei Yi tilted his head to look and saw that Han Yunxi's injured feet were wrapped in thick layers of white gauze from her ankle to her toes. Those who didn't know better would think that it was a plaster cast. Long Fei Yi seemed to be very satisfied with this. He retracted his gaze and didn't pursue the matter. He coughed lightly and asked mildly, You applied medicine last night. Is it still not better? Haha, Han Yunxi sneered inwardly. This fellow was satisfied and knew how to care for others. He was satisfied, but she was still unhappy. Han Yunxi raised her head and narrowed her eyes into a smile, her expression completely harmless. Long Fei Yi was stunned. What was this woman smiling about? Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi's expression immediately changed. Her face was gloomy as she said coldly, Thanks to Your Highness, it won't recover so quickly. Actually, it was just a sprain. Moreover, Long Fei Ye's medicine was quite effective, so it would recover very quickly. However, she had almost been crippled by this fellow last night. The strength of his hands when applying medicine was enough to ruin her feet. Han Yunxi changed her expression as quickly as flipping a book. Long Fei Yi didn't expect this and was silent. Han Yunxi smiled again. "Thank you for your highness' concern." Long Fei Yi looked at her and became even more silent. His deep gaze deepened. Han Yunxi hated the feeling of being inferior in front of this fellow the most. Even though she was a little timid, she still met his gaze openly. At this moment, Long Fei Yi suddenly stood up. He was leaving. Han Yunxi immediately lowered her eyes and ignored the disappointment in her heart. So what if she was bold enough to provoke him? Wasn't this fellow always like this? He would either be so domineering that she couldn't say anything, or leave without saying a word. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi didn't leave. Instead, he changed his position and sat down beside Han Yunxi. "Feet." His voice was cold as he said one word. Han Yunxi was stunned and blurted out, "What are you doing?" Long Fei Yi didn't answer. Instead, he reached out and picked up her feet, placing them on his thighs. "Let go." Han Yunxi was fierce. She was about to struggle when Long Fei Yi held her down and said in a low voice, "Don't move." Han Yunxi still wanted to struggle, but no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't move. She frowned as she looked at him. She couldn't see his face, but she realized that this fellow's side profile looked better than his face. The lines were so perfect that they looked like they were carved. He was especially cold and handsome. Han Yunxi looked at him and unknowingly quieted down. Long Fei Yi pressed down on Han Yunxi's feet with one hand and used the other to untie the bundles of gauze that were wrapped around Han Yunxi's feet. "Is there any progress on the tea leaves?" Han Yunxi immediately looked back and saw him standing at the door, looking in her direction. "There's a bit of progress. Tomorrow, I'll be going to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House with the young general," she quickly replied. Long Fei Yi nodded and didn't ask any more questions. He turned around and left. After his figure disappeared, Han Yunxi slowly turned back to look at the table full of food. She didn't know why she was so happy, but she couldn't help but burst out in laughter. Zhao Mama was baffled as she watched from the side. His Highness didn't stay for dinner, but esteemed Wang Fei was still happy. She timidly asked, "Esteemed Wang Fei, the food is already cold. Do you want this old servant to warm it up?" "No need." Han Yunxi picked up her chopsticks. Her appetite seemed to have improved as she ate in big mouthfuls and drank large mouthfuls of soup. That night, the lights in Long Fei Ye's bedroom were lit the entire time. Han Yunxi leaned against the chaise lounge by the window in deep thought. Unknowingly, she fell asleep. Chapter 108. The next day, before Mu Qingwu arrived, Steward Xia delivered a large pile of tea leaves. Most of them were spring tea leaves, autumn tea leaves, and winter tea leaves. All of them were freshly preserved. Who said that the preservation conditions in ancient times were limited? Seeing the things in front of her, Han Yunxi could only sigh. Since ancient times, there was nothing that couldn't be done with money. Looking at the pots of fragrant tea leaves, she didn't even bother to eat breakfast. She went straight to the study to do her experiments. Just like before, she separated and matched the tea water and tea leaves. She even deliberately used green tea to try a few more times. Unfortunately, the results were very disappointing. Once again, everything failed. There were no surprises. According to the method of roasting, she classified the tea leaves into spring, autumn, and winter according to the harvest season. Unfortunately, she didn't succeed. Han Yunxi walked out of the study with her head lowered. She was somewhat disheartened. Did she suspect the wrong person, or did she miss something? The place of origin. Could it be the place of origin? Other than the method of roasting in harvest season, the only other way to classify tea leaves was the place of origin. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi regained her spirit. Perhaps she would be able to gain something from the celestial fragrance tea shop today. Esteemed Wang Fei, it's time to eat. Zhao Mama reminded her. Han Yunxi recovered her senses. Just as she sat down, Zhao Mama said, His Highness woke up early and is making tea in the courtyard. Han Yunxi's chopsticks paused for a moment. It was only for a moment, but she didn't react. Zhao Mama looked down at her for a long time, then casually said, His Highness likes the red South Peak from the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop the most. Han Yunxi was still silent. She minded her own business and ate as if she didn't hear anything. After eating, seeing that Zhao Mama wasn't around, Han Yunxi walked out of the courtyard. Her gaze unconsciously drifted to the large garden. Unfortunately, she didn't even see a shadow. Unexpectedly, Zhao Mama suddenly appeared behind her and chuckled. Esteemed Wang Fei, Han Yunxi jumped in fright. She felt guilty as if she was a thief. She turned around and said fiercely, What are you doing? Zhao Mama felt wronged and said timidly, The attendant outside reported that the young general is waiting for you at the back door. Han Yunxi's anger finally subsided. She hurriedly left as if she was running away. Mu Qingwu saw Han Yunxi limping out and realized that her leg was injured. Esteemed Wang Fei, what's wrong with your leg? Actually, Han Yunxi could already walk normally, but she didn't dare use too much strength for fear of repercussions. That was why she was limping. She jumped into the carriage, It's nothing. Wang Fei, why don't we go another day? Your leg, although it's, Mu, of the Wang Fei, Wang Fei, of course, and I. Han Yunxi reminded her with a smile. Including today, there were only 12 days left in her bet with Mu Luiyue. Mu Qingwu didn't know how to answer and could only get into the carriage. However, he didn't dare to sit in the same carriage as esteemed Wang Fei. Instead, he sat beside the coachman. Han Yunxi wanted to let him sit in the carriage, but she remembered Long Fei Ye's warning yesterday. She hesitated for a moment and gave up. Long Fei was a bit of an old-fashioned antique, but in this world, no matter if one was a young girl or a married woman, as long as one was a woman, they had to restrain themselves. If they didn't, they'd be caught red-handed and get themselves into more trouble. When they arrived at the Heavenly Fragrance Tea Shop, it was still early. There weren't many guests in the tea garden. The Heavenly Fragrance Tea Shop was surrounded by 3 tea mountains. In front of it was a stream. The environment was beautiful and quiet. The tea garden occupied a large area. There were more than 30 courtyards of various sizes. Moreover, in the southwest corner, there was a hot spring villa under the Heavenly Fragrance Tea Garden's name. Not to mention the manpower and resources used to build this tea garden, just the land on the outskirts of the capital was priceless. It was said that the owner of the Heavenly Fragrance Tea Shop was an extremely low-key person. His whereabouts were very mysterious. He was a man with wealth that could rival a country. Even now, no one who came to drink tea had seen him in person. Mu Qingwu had already made an appointment. When he saw the general's carriage, the manservant at the gate didn't dare to stop him. He also didn't dare to neglect him. He immediately led the carriage to a separate courtyard. This courtyard was called the New Rain Courtyard. It was the courtyard that Mu Luiyue had reserved for a long time. It just so happened that she didn't come today. As soon as Han Yunxi got off the carriage, she was drawn in by her surroundings. This independent courtyard was very private, surrounded by high walls and a garden full of blooming flowers. There was even a tea table hidden among the flowers, with incense burning in spirals that seeped into one's nose. Esteemed Wang Fei, be careful. Mu Qingwu signaled with his eyes, and the servant girl immediately came forward to support her. Han Yunxi said that there was no need. She limped along the stone path into the flowers and sat down cross-legged beside the tea table. If it wasn't for the fact that she had something to do, she really wanted to stay here for a few days and relax a bit. If this place was placed in the modern era, it would be the highest level of high-class clubs. It was suitable for secret meetings, and it was even more suitable for lovers. It seems like the princess consort likes this place very much. Mu Qingwu also sat down. If there was a pot of good tea, that would be even better. Han Yunxi jokingly said. Today, he'd come to take a look at the tea house, as well as to inquire about Mu Liuyue's spending and social records. Han Yunxi was absolutely certain that Mu Liuyue wouldn't harm her own brother. If someone had borrowed her hands to poison the tea leaves, then the 10,000 snake poison would either come from the celestial fragrance tea shop, or from the tea leaves gifted by her friends. The heavenly fragrance tea garden's tea leaves all had labels. If it was the heavenly fragrance tea garden that poisoned them, then it would be too obvious. The culprit wouldn't be that stupid. Han Yunxi was more inclined to believe that it was Mu Liuyue's friends who poisoned them. If it was a friend who gave her poison tea leaves, then it must be someone who frequently gave her tea leaves. Since ancient times, giving gifts was a common occurrence. However, this gift wasn't randomly given and it wasn't randomly accepted. Mu Liuyue, this young miss who spent lavishly on food and clothes, wasn't greedy. She didn't lack a few pots of tea leaves. There must be a reason why she could frequently accept other people's tea gifts. Either the tea leaves were especially good and could capture Mu Liuyue's taste, or the person who gave the tea was someone who had a good relationship with Mu Liuyue. Mu Liuyue didn't come to the heavenly fragrance tea garden just to buy tea, but also to meet friends to drink tea. Han Yunxi naturally had to investigate the heavenly fragrance tea garden first. Mu Qingwu ordered green tea. The tea servant's tea skills were very professional. Washing, taking, steeping, carrying, drinking, pouring, and cleaning were all very particular. Han Yunxi tasted a few cups before asking, "Are these tea leaves from the tea garden?" Replying to the princess consort, the tea leaves provided by the tea garden all come from the 3 tea mountains in the back. They are all roasted by the tea garden. However, customers can also bring their own tea here. The tea servant answered truthfully. Han Yunxi thoughtfully nodded and asked, "Does young Miss Mu often bring her own tea here?" When these words came out, the tea servant didn't immediately answer. Instead, she looked embarrassed. The tea servant in each independent courtyard of the heavenly fragrance tea garden was fixed. Many of the independent courtyards were reserved by customers all year round. These tea servants became private tea servants and only served fixed people. If it weren't for Mu Qingwu today, Han Yunxi might not have been able to enter this Xinyu courtyard. The tea servants served the customers and saw and heard the most things. Their first duty was to keep the customers' secrets. If esteemed Wang Fei asks you a question, just answer it. "I've already informed your deacon," Mu Qingwu said indifferently. In fact, if he wanted to investigate Mu Liuyue, he only needed to ask her. However, Mu Qingwu knew his sister's temperament the best. It was fine if he didn't ask. Once he asked, not only would she not answer truthfully, but she would also fabricate many lies to interfere with the investigation. Therefore, he could only bring esteemed princess consort to the heavenly fragrance tea garden to investigate. After all, Mu Qingwu was Mu Liuyue's brother. With his words, the tea servant felt much more relieved and immediately answered, replying to esteemed princess consort, "Young Miss Mu doesn't bring her own tea every time she comes. When she comes, she drinks the tea from the tea garden. When she comes with friends, it's usually her friends who bring her tea." When these words came out, Han Yunxi and Mu Qingwu immediately became alert. Without a doubt, this situation was very consistent with their speculations. Who does young Miss drink tea with? Mu Qingwu quickly asked. The tea servant thought for a moment and answered, there are several people who come often. Princess Chongping, the third miss of the Prime Minister's family, the eldest miss of the military secretary's family, the seventh miss of the Lin family, the second miss of the Han family. The tea servant said a bunch of names. Even Mu Qingwu was surprised. He didn't expect his sister to have so many friends. At the end of her speech, the servant girl added, eldest young miss came here with the Han family's second young Mississippi, which Han family? Han Yunxi couldn't help but ask. Although the only Han family in the capital that had connections with Mu Luiyue was her maternal family, she still wanted to confirm. It's the medical family, the Han family, esteemed Princess Consort's maternal family, the tea servant replied in a low voice. The second miss of the Han family, Madame Li's daughter, Han Ruoxue. A trace of hesitation flashed across Han Yunxi's eyes. Although she was now even more certain that Madame Li was the culprit, she was still very calm. After all, these were all speculations and there was no real evidence. If she locked onto Madame Li now, it was very likely that she would miss other clues and miss the real culprit. Han Yunxi had never investigated a case before, but she thought that investigating a case and making a diagnosis should be based on the same principle. One couldn't make subjective guesses. There were too many similar symptoms, so they had to be eliminated one by one until there was a clear diagnosis to support the diagnosis. Otherwise, in the end, it would only be treating the wrong illness and harming the patient. Han Yunxi didn't continue speaking. Mu Qingwu, who didn't know Madame Li's suspicions, was much more impartial. He asked seriously, among these people, who drank tea with young Miss the most? The tea servant thought for a moment and shook her head. This servant didn't calculate seriously. The few young misses all came often, so this servant didn't have any special impression. Who delivered tea most often? Mu Qingwu asked again. This time, the tea servant didn't even think and answered without hesitation, the second miss of the Han family. Hearing this, Han Yunxi's heart suddenly skipped a beat. She suddenly had a very bad feeling. Mu Qingwu didn't immediately continue asking. He looked at Han Yunxi and his gaze gradually became complicated. The second miss of the Han family was from esteemed Princess Consort's maternal family. She was esteemed Princess Consort's half-sister. If Han Ruoxue was the culprit, then the Han family was facing a disaster. Think carefully. Is there anyone else? Mu Qingwu asked seriously. The young misses of the Prime Minister's manor and the Minister of War's family often sent tea to young miss, but not as often as the second miss of the Han family. The second miss of the Han family seemed to send tea every time. Young Miss Mu likes the tea from the second miss of the Han family, the tea servant replied. She thought for a moment and said, in the past 2 to 3 years, the second miss of the Han family must have sent tea the most. Especially last year, she would send tea every 1 or 2 months. When this was said, even Mu Qingwu fell silent and didn't continue asking. Without a doubt, Han Ruoxue was the most suspicious. Chapter 109. Seeing that Mu Qingwu and Han Yunxi were both silent, the tea servant had long sensed that something was wrong. However, the tea house would keep records of the consumption of these things that the young general asked, so she didn't dare to lie. Not long ago, second Miss Han had left a jar of high-quality spring tea here. Many influential people who came to drink tea would leave their tea leaves behind, and none of them came back to look for it. Thus, she had a sneaky idea and hid the jar of tea leaves. Who knew that the next day, someone from the Han family came to look for it? She couldn't take it out again, so she could only lie and say that she didn't see it. The tea that second Miss Han had sent was of the highest quality, and many of them were even better than those in the tea house. If they could be resold in the tea market, they would definitely be able to fetch a good price. The tea servant had planned to find a time to secretly take it out and sell it, but who knew that something like this would happen today? She was scared witless and didn't dare to sell the tea leaves. She only hoped that they wouldn't find out that she was the culprit. If the steward of the tea house found out that she had stolen a guest's tea, only death would await her. Seeing that Mu Qingwu was also silent, Han Yunxi sighed softly in her heart and said lightly, "Young general, if you can make me feel at ease, then I can also make you feel at ease. Don't worry." The tea servant didn't understand these words, but Mu Qingwu did. When investigating Mu Luyue, he had promised that he wouldn't be biased. Now, the Han family was the biggest suspect, and esteemed Wang Fei was giving the same promise. He didn't expect that esteemed Wang Fei, who was just a woman, would have such awe-inspiring righteousness. Mu Qingwu cupped his hands in salute, his face full of respect and trust. It was this trust that made Han Yunxi feel even more pressure. At the same time, it made her even more determined. No matter who the culprit was, as long as it was the real culprit, she would definitely find out. Were the tea leaves that second Miss Han brewed here before? She finally opened her mouth. The tea servant shook her head. The tea that second Miss Han brewed was mostly left behind for us to reward after it was opened. The tea that was given to eldest Miss Mu was unopened. Were they the same tea leaves? Han Yunxi asked again. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It's not certain, the tea servant answered honestly. Are there any left? Han Yunxi continued to ask. The tea servant immediately stood up and soon returned with 2 cans of tea leaves. This was left behind by second young Miss Han recently. Han Yunxi inspected the tea leaves and didn't find any traces of poison. Everything was normal. Mu Qingwu hesitated for a moment, then personally brewed the tea leaves and drank it. As soon as he smelled the fragrance of the tea, his face became intoxicated. What's wrong? Han Yunxi asked curiously. The reason why Mu Luyue kept receiving tea leaves from Han Ruoxue was because the tea leaves weren't ordinary. This taste. This tea is the first batch of spring tea in southern wilderness. It's a top-grade green tea. Mu Qingwu was very certain. If the same tea tree was planted in different places, the tea leaves would definitely be different. The climate, soil, and water source for irrigation would determine the difference in the trace elements in the tea leaves, which would lead to the different taste of the tea. Most people wouldn't be able to taste it, but an experienced tea addict could tell with a single sniff. This really is the first batch of spring tea from southern wilderness. Only the red soil of southern wilderness can produce this kind of green tea. Young General is amazing. The tea servant's face was full of praise. Actually, she really wanted to say that the can that second young Miss Han didn't give away was better than this one. Unfortunately, she didn't dare. Is this tea very rare? Han Yunxi asked in confusion. Esteemed Wang Fei, southern wilderness tea is the most popular, especially spring tea. It's produced in small quantities and is always sold out before it's even picked, the tea servant answered honestly. If it wasn't for the tea and the tea servant's reminder, Mu Qingwu wouldn't have noticed that the green tea he drank most often had a difference in origin. He looked at Han Yunxi with a serious gaze and said seriously, I've been obsessed with this kind of tea for the past 2 to 3 years. Many of the tea that Luyue sent over were southern wilderness green tea. Southern wilderness green tea. Han Yunxi slightly knit her brows. While Mu Qingwu and the tea servant weren't paying attention, she silently took a few tea leaves and put them into her medical pouch. She also took out a gold needle and some tea water and put them in. Actually, she was putting them into the detoxification system to be broken down. After breaking them down, she immediately came to a different conclusion from before. These tea leaves and tea water had an extremely high iron content. She had broken down 2 batches of tea leaves before and matched the various components of the tea leaves with the 10,000 snake poison, but she had always failed. The first time she analyzed the type of tea, the second time she deeply inhaled the tea leaves from 3 seasons. As for the origin, she had never analyzed it. Could it be the green tea of Nanjiang spring tea? Han Yunxi couldn't wait any longer. As soon as she analyzed the components of these tea leaves, she immediately began to intelligently mix them in the detoxification system. Her brows were tightly knit and her face was serious. She was completely focused, hoping to get an accurate answer. Mu Qingwu and the tea servant watched from the side, wondering what had happened to her. "Esteemed Wang Fei, are you all right?" Mu Qingwu asked with concern. After a short moment, Han Yunxi came back to her senses and sighed softly. "I'm fine." "All right," she failed again. Southern Wilderness green tea failed, but it wasn't this. Did they misunderstand Han Ruoxue, or was there a difference between the tea leaves that Han Ruoxue used to brew and the tea leaves that she gave to Mu Luyue? If there was a difference, with Mu Qingwu's level of tea fanatic drinking so often, he would be able to more or less taste it. Han Yunxi hesitated for a moment before waving her hand to have the tea servant and the surrounding maids withdraw. Once they left, Mu Qingwu hurriedly asked, "Esteemed Wang Fei, did you discover something? Is there any difference between the tea leaves that Luyue gave you and other tea leaves?" Han Yunxi asked seriously. Mu Qingwu knew why esteemed Wang Fei asked this question, but he didn't know how to give her a clear answer. "Esteemed Wang Fei, this is hard to say. Tea leaves of the same origin, season, and variety, as long as they are normally roasted and preserved, the taste won't be too different. However, there are many subtle differences." Mu Qingwu paused for a moment before continuing. "Tea leaves of the same origin, whether they were given by Luyue or someone else, Luyue's tea would be better. It's mainly in the roasting and preservation techniques. Of course, sometimes it's also related to the water, utensils, and time used to brew the tea. These are all hard to say." Han Yunxi understood Mu Qingwu's words as soon as she heard it. It was obviously impossible to find an answer from these uncertain and changeable factors. Just the roasting techniques alone had many subtle differences. Where were they going to find them one by one? Han Yunxi originally wanted to find the recipe for the poisonous tea leaves and then follow the recipe to find evidence. Now, it seemed that if they followed this trail, they wouldn't be able to find anything even after a long time. She organized her thoughts, put aside the various influencing factors, and returned to the suspicious point of the tea leaves. If they were sure that the suspicious point was the tea leaves, they only had one way to go now, and that was to find the poisonous tea leaves. However, at this juncture, the culprit might have already been prepared. How could it be so easy to find the poisonous tea leaves? If they gave up on this suspect, then they could only start from the suspect. Han Yunxi's considerations were exactly what Mu Qingwu was thinking. Seeing Mu Qingwu's serious expression, she smiled. "Young General, this trip was fruitful. There's no progress in the tea leaves, but at least, we've confirmed the suspect. Actually, based on today's clues, Han Ruoxue's suspicions were not small. In addition, her discovery at Third Madam's place made her even more suspicious." Han Yunxi didn't mention Long Fei Ye's involvement in this matter. After all, this matter involved a spy in Northernly, and Long Fei Ye had always been investigating in secret. She silently hoped that Long Fei Ye would be able to find other clues. Mu Qingwu didn't expect that today's investigation would lead to the Han family's second miss. When he returned, he had to report to His Highness Duke of Qin immediately. He thought that it wouldn't be difficult for His Highness Duke of Qin to investigate the Han family's third branch, Madam Li, and the second Miss background. This matter was related to the Northernly spy case and couldn't be made public. He also couldn't reveal it to esteemed Wang Fei. The two of them undoubtedly focused on the suspect and placed their hopes on Long Fei Yi, but the other didn't know. Mu Qingwu nodded, "Don't worry, esteemed Wang Fei. The general's estate will definitely investigate this matter as soon as possible. If there's any news, we'll inform you immediately. If I have any progress, I'll let you know." Han Yunxi was especially honest. Mu Qingwu was stunned. Could it be that this master wanted to personally investigate the Han family? One had to know that she was the Han family's daughter who had married out. It wasn't good for her to frequently return to her maternal home. Secondly, as Qin Wang Fei, there were some things she had to consider. "Esteemed Wang Fei, according to this official's opinion, you should..." Before Mu Qingwu could finish his words, Han Yunxi lazily stood up. "Let's go, we'll go buy some tea." Her mind was a bit messy. She wanted to empty her mind and didn't want to talk about this case for now. Mu Qingwu couldn't persuade her anymore, so he asked, "What kind of tea does esteemed Wang Fei like? You can have the tea servant bring it over. I heard that the Red South Peak here is pretty good. I have to personally go up the mountain to pick it." Han Yunxi thought that she had to bribe Long Fei Yi and have him quickly investigate the Han family's third branch. With that fellow's efficiency, he would definitely have news in 3 or 4 days. If he made a mistake, she still had a few days to adjust. Esteemed Wang Fei really knows what's good. Heavenly Fragrance Tea House's Red South Peak is exclusively for the imperial family. It's not for sale. Mu Qingwu smiled as he said. Han Yunxi was a bit disappointed. "So you're saying that I can't buy it?" "This official can't buy it, but esteemed Wang Fei is a member of the imperial family, so naturally you can buy it. I just don't know if this official will be able to bask in esteemed Wang Fei's glory today." Mu Qingwu asked jokingly. After interacting with each other several times, he had unknowingly become much more relaxed. He was no longer as respectful and reserved as before. However, he didn't notice it himself. Han Yunxi's interest was immediately piqued. "Then let's go." Under the guidance of the tea servant, Mu Qingwu and Han Yunxi arrived at the back of the mountain. This was where the Red South Peak was planted. The rows of trees were tightly packed together and only one person could pass through at a time. Although the tea trees weren't tall, they weren't short either. Once they stood inside, they would be covered in half of their bodies. Under the guidance of the tea master, Han Yunxi quickly grasped the technique of picking tea leaves. She walked with Mu Qingwu into the tea trees. After all, they were on a mountain path and Han Yunxi's foot was injured. Mu Qingwu didn't have time to pick tea leaves. He kept protecting Han Yunxi by her side, afraid that she would fall or sprain her ankle. Seeing that many of the tea leaves had insect bites, Han Yunxi said to herself, "There are a lot of pests. They must not have sprayed pesticides, right?" In the modern era, it was normal for tea leaves to be sprayed with pesticides. There were even many unscrupulous tea farmers who used excessive amounts of pesticides or pesticides that were banned by the country to ensure their harvest. Pesticides. Mu Qingwu didn't understand. Who would have thought that Han Yunxi would suddenly turn around and cry out in shock, "Poison! What if 10,000 snake poison was placed on the tea trees?" Chapter 110. If the pesticide was added to the tea would definitely change color and taste. Even if it was just a little bit, it would still have a pungent smell. However, if the pesticide was sprayed on the tea trees, the tea leaves would be roasted and then steeped in tea, and the pesticide smell would disappear. If the pesticide was not so small that it could be ignored, then whether it was the tea leaves or the tea water, the pesticide residue could still be detected. Drinking tea leaves with pesticide residue for a long time would definitely have a certain effect on the human body. Then, what if the pesticide was replaced with poison, or the 10,000 snake poison? Wouldn't it be the same? The tea leaves contain 10,000 snake poison, but after being steeped, there was no smell at all. It wouldn't change color or taste. Only a professional and precise test could detect it. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi's heart was shocked. Her eyes widened. It must be like this. Mu Qingwu was confused. Princess Consort, what are you talking about? Han Yunxi was about to explain, but who would have thought that a sharp sound would suddenly come from behind? Princess Consort, be careful. Mu Qingwu cried out in alarm. He suddenly pushed Han Yunxi towards the tea trees and then turned around to protect her. With his rich experience on the battlefield, he could immediately tell that this was the sound of an arrow coming from behind. There was an assassin. When Mu Qingwu turned around to block Han Yunxi, he also pulled out his sword and fiercely swung it at the arrow coming at him. His series of movements were clean and very beautiful. The arrow fell, but he couldn't see where the assassin was. In front of him was an empty space. Other than the tea trees, there were more tea trees. The entire hillside was silent. Mu Qingwu didn't hesitate. He was alert to the movements around him as he shouted, "Someone, quickly call the guards. There's an assassin." The two tea masters on the side were so scared that they immediately turned around and ran. The guards of the tea garden hadn't arrived yet, but suddenly another arrow came from the right. Mu Qingwu waved his sword and easily knocked it down. The princess consort was behind him, so he didn't dare to carelessly chase. Moreover, the terrain they were in wasn't good for retreating. Mu Qingwu could only stay in place and wait for reinforcements to arrive. Fortunately, judging from the speed of the arrows, there was only one assassin. Han Yunxi lay on the tea tree and did not dare to move. She admitted that she was very timid. She did not know any martial arts. If she was not careful, she would lose her life. Esteemed Wang Fei, the reinforcements will be here soon. I'll have to trouble you. Mu Qingwu said in a low voice. I'm fine. Be careful. Han Yunxi felt terrible. She bent over at a 90-degree angle, and her whole stomach was pressed against the tea tree. She really wanted to vomit. Whoosh! Another sharp sword came from the left. Mu Qingwu continued to hit him fiercely and coldly said, "Who are you? Sneaking around, what kind of hero are you?" Han Yunxi was speechless. The other party was an assassin. How could he be a hero? It was obvious that his abilities were limited. Since his sneak attack failed, he could only continue with his sneak attack. Otherwise, wouldn't they take advantage of the fact that reinforcements hadn't arrived to end the battle quickly? Han Yunxi had never encountered an assassin before, so she had never encountered any kind of fighting. With this conjecture, she felt much more at ease. But who knew that Mu Qingwu would suddenly be shocked? He said in a low voice, "Esteemed Wang Fei, there are many people coming. Did we offend them?" What? Before Han Yunxi could understand, Mu Qingwu turned around and pulled her into his arms. Then, he soared into the air. Almost at the same time, countless arrows flew from all directions. Whoosh! 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 The sound of the arrows breaking through the air was incessant. Mu Qingwu held Han Yunxi tightly in his arms with one hand and held his sword with the other. He swung his sword to knock down the arrows while constantly turning around to dodge. Han Yunxi buried her head in his arms and fiercely dodged up and down, spinning around. She was dizzy and could not see what was happening, but she could clearly hear the sound of arrows and swords colliding. Clang! 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 Rapid, loud, and abnormally fierce. There were actually so many people lying in ambush. Were they here for Mu Qingwu or for her? Mu Qingwu was completely focused on blocking the arrows. The assassins still did not show themselves and were hiding in the tea trees. They were using very easy-to-shoot arrows. The reason why they did not shoot 10,000 arrows at once was because they were worried that they would expose themselves too early and would not be able to hurt him. They wanted to let him be careless and then use all their firepower. It was obvious that these assassins knew him very well. Could they be the assassins who tried to assassinate him in the imperial capital last time? At this time, Mu Qingwu did not care so much. His first task was to protect esteemed Wang Fei and not let her come to any harm. Otherwise, he would not be able to explain himself to the Duke of Qin's manor. The arrows were increasing in number. Mu Qingwu did not have a chance to escape. He could not even find a chance to take the initiative to attack. He could only block them. The only thing he was thankful for was that this was the tea garden and reinforcements would arrive soon. If they were attacked in the wilderness, he would not be able to hold on for long with the enemy's strength. Quick! They're all hiding in the tea trees. Split up and search. Soon, a sharp order was heard. It was none other than the manager of the tea garden and the representative of the manor lord, Guard Shengwan. A light punishment would be the execution of the whole family. A heavy punishment would be the death of the entire family. Yes, they know me very well. Mu Qingwu said indifferently, his gaze not leaving the battlefield. But who knew that at this moment, Han Yunxi suddenly heard a beep 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 sound. The frequency of this warning sound told her that there was poison rapidly approaching and should be behind her. Han Yunxi did not recover her senses for a moment and unconsciously turned her head to look behind her. Ah! Han Yunxi screamed loudly. She did not know where she got the strength from, but she fiercely pushed Mu Qingwu away. Mu Qingwu did not expect this and was directly pushed to the ground. Almost at the same time, a sharp sword came from behind and stabbed at the position where Mu Qingwu was just standing. If Han Yunxi did not push him away, the consequences would be unimaginable. He was actually able to approach without a sound and almost take Mu Qingwu's life, and Mu Qingwu didn't even notice. What kind of expert was this? The person holding the sword behind him was actually a female assassin in black. Without a doubt, her martial arts were above Mu Qingwu's. She instantly approached and grabbed Han Yunxi's hand. Let go of me. Let go. Han Yunxi screamed as she fiercely struggled in fear. So this group of assassins' target was not Mu Qingwu, but her. No one had expected such a thing to happen. This female assassin was a true assassin. Everything else was a cover. Even Guard Shengwan looked over and was stunned. However, Mu Qingwu's reaction was very fast. He quickly grabbed his sword and jumped up, but who would have thought that the female assassin would grab Han Yunxi's hand while suddenly turning around and stabbing her sword at Mu Qingwu. All of this happened too fast. Mu Qingwu did not have a choice. He would rather take the sword and protect the princess consort. He did not dodge and used his shoulder to meet the female assassin's sword. At the same time, his sword stabbed at the female assassin's heart. Who would have thought that at this moment, Han Yunxi would cry out in alarm, "Be careful of the poison on her sword. You will die." Mu Qingwu was distracted. At this moment of life and death, when the two swords were about to hit each other, the female assassin's sword turned and fiercely knocked away Mu Qingwu's sword. At the same time, she pulled Han Yunxi into her embrace and turned to run. Princess Consort. Mu Qingwu was scared out of his wits and sprang to his feet in an instant. Guard Shengwan had already flown past him and chased after him. Mu Qingwu did not delay and chased after her. But unexpectedly, the female assassin's speed was very fast. Whether it was Mu Qingwu or Guard Shengwan, they could not catch up. From afar, they saw that they were about to leave the heavenly fragrance tea house. The two of them used all their strength to chase after her, but they could not catch up. They could only watch as that figure disappeared into the mountains and disappeared. "It's over." Guard Shengwan panted as he lay paralyzed on the ground, his face pale. Qin Wangfei was kidnapped in the heavenly fragrance tea house. How could he bear this? Mu Qingwu's face was even paler than Guard Shengwan's. Only then did he realize that this group of assassins was after the Princess Consort. The two of them looked at each other in dismay, but they did not see a red figure sweep past them and disappear into the mountains. Very quickly, the two of them thought of the group of assassins left on the mountainside of Nanshan. Unfortunately, when they arrived, all they saw were corpses. All the assassins in black had killed themselves. Useless things. Guard Shengwan angrily sent a guard flying with a kick. Mu Qingwu clenched his fists until they made cracking sounds. He coldly said, "Search the mountains." Guard Shengwan, immediately search the mountains for me. Also, send someone to report to the Duke of Qin's manor. After he finished speaking, he did not have time to catch his breath and immediately rushed into the mountains. Guard Shengwan did not dare to delay and immediately arranged everything. He himself immediately flew towards the peak of Shishan Mountain. With such a big thing happening, he had to report it to the manor head. Without the antidote, she actually had no reaction at all. That's strange. Han Yunqi didn't believe it. She clenched her teeth and dug her nails deeper, making the ant poison penetrate faster. But who would have thought that the female assassin was still smiling disdainfully, as if it had nothing to do with her. She didn't even look at her as she borrowed strength from the tree and flew even faster. Could it be? Han Yunqi thought of something and almost blurted it out. Fortunately, she shut her mouth in time. However, her face was pale and very ugly. Immune. The reason why this person didn't have any reaction to the ant poison was most likely because she had immunity against poison. There was a type of person who had immunity against poison, so they wouldn't be poisoned. Those who were born with immunity were few and far between. Even if they were born with it, they would only be immune to one or two types of poison. But for those who were injected with various antibodies to develop immunity, then there was a possibility that they would have immunity against a large type of poison. The same type of poison wouldn't be able to poison her. Injecting antibodies was a modern term. In ancient times, it was called a poison nurturing. Modern injecting antibodies to poison were divided into level 1, level 2, and level 3. The higher the level, the higher the immunity and the stronger the poison that they could withstand. Of course, the higher the immunity, the more serious the damage to the body's normal functions. It could even be life-threatening. So no matter if it was research and development or clinical application, it was strictly controlled or even prohibited. Han Yunqi remembered that she had read in an ancient poison manual. In ancient times, poison nurturing was also divided into poison humans, poison corpses and poison goo. Poison humans had a limited lifespan, at most 30 years. They had their own independent personality and were no different from a normal person. They had immunity against low-level poisons such as those that only affected the skin, flesh, hair and other non-fatal poisons. Poison corpses were actually similar to death soldiers. Their lifespan didn't exceed a year. They had immunity against middle-level poisons such as those that affected the bones and blood. As for poison goo, what kind of existence was it? There were very few records in ancient books and Han Yunqi didn't know much about it. She only knew that according to the records, even those high-level poisons that affected the internal organs couldn't do anything to poison goo. Han Yunqi had always felt that ancient poisons were plentiful but the poison arts were far from modern times. The records in ancient poison manuals were most likely just a hypothesis and didn't have the conditions to realize it. Even if it really existed, it could only be an individual case. But who knew that she had underestimated the poison arts of ancient times? Today, she had easily encountered one. Based on the situation of this female assassin, she should be a poison person. The discovery of the 10,000 snake poison and the poison mosquito swarm had already caused Han Yunshi to feel apprehensive. Now that a poison person had appeared, what kind of poison expert was behind the northernly country's spies? Previously, Han Yunshi had suspected that this female assassin was the head of the spies. But now, it seemed that she was just a tool. There must be someone behind her. She had to admit that the opponent was mysterious and valiant. It had somewhat exceeded Han Yunshi's expectations. Of course, Han Yunshi wasn't someone who was easy to deal with. She carried with her a large arsenal of poisons. Was there any need to fear that there wouldn't be enough to deal with this female poison person assassin? She pretended to be discouraged and let go of the female assassin's hand. She coldly questioned, "Who exactly are you? Why did you kidnap me?" The female assassin seemed to be very disdainful of Han Yunshi and even seemed to be dissatisfied. She gave a disdainful snort and didn't answer. "You dare to kidnap me? His Highness Duke of Qin will definitely not let you off." Han Yunshi deliberately provoked while her small hand silently reached into her medical pouch. With a thought, she casually grabbed a handful of bone-eroding powder. Bone-eroding powder, as the name implied, was a poison specially used to corrode bones. Once it entered the bloodstream, it would immediately invade the marrow. "Han Yunshi, do you really think you've become a phoenix? Really, really shameless." The female assassin became even more disdainful. She landed on the edge of the cliff and grabbed Han Yunshi tightly, as if wanting to jump down. "It's so. You're about the same," Han Yunshi said very calmly, her gaze sweeping over the wound on the female assassin's arm that she had just scratched out with her fingernails. "You dare to scold me?" The female assassin was enraged. She glared coldly and turned her arm towards Han Yunshi. "How about it?" Han Yunshi coldly provoked. Then, with quick reflexes, the hand holding the bone-eroding powder immediately moved towards the female assassin's wound. But, unexpectedly, the female assassin's vigilance was very high. Almost without thinking, she immediately pushed Han Yunshi away. In a flash, she pulled out her sword and sliced off an entire piece of flesh from her arm. The entire process didn't take more than 10 seconds. So fast. So ruthless. Han Yunshi landed at the side and lost her balance. She fell a few steps and sat on the ground, almost falling off the cliff. As long as she held the female assassin's wound, the poison would definitely be administered. But she had never thought that the female assassin would actually slice off her flesh without hesitation. Wasn't this reaction too fast and too professional? Of course, Han Yunshi, who was sitting on the edge of the cliff, couldn't care so much. She was so frightened that her heart almost stopped beating. She hurriedly got up and wanted to run. But the female assassin instantly closed in and grabbed her collar, roaring angrily, "You slut, go and die." Han Yunshi still wanted to use poison. She could only use poison. But who knew that the female assassin didn't give her any chance and suddenly threw her off the cliff. Only a scream was heard. Following that, the female assassin chased after her. Very quickly, the two figures disappeared into the abyss. Bang! A loud sound rang through the entire general's residence main hall. Long Fei Yi stood high up on the main seat. His face was like black ice and his anger overflowed to the heavens. It was like the sky before a violent snowstorm. Especially that pair of cold eyes, it was so deep that it penetrated people's hearts. Because of his rage, it created a strong pressure. The large main hall seemed to have become smaller. The cold aura intimidated Great General Gu and the heavenly fragrance teahouse's servants to kneel on the ground, not daring to raise their heads. Qin Wangfei was kidnapped. What a serious matter this was. The anger in Long Fei Ye's deep eyes jumped. He didn't realize how angry he was. He was so angry that he couldn't calm down. Since the people who kidnapped Han Yunxi were familiar with Mu Qingguo, then it must be the group of spies from northernly country. Now that Han Yunxi had fallen into their hands, how could she be in good condition? General Mu knew that this matter was serious, but he didn't expect His Highness Duke of Qin to be so angry. At this time, he didn't dare to ask for punishment. The most important thing was to hurry and save the princess. His hands were trembling as he reported, "Your Highness Duke of Qin, Qingwu has already sent people to seal off the entrances to the mountains. She must still be in the mountains. Since those people are kidnapping her, esteemed Wang Fei's life won't be in danger for the time being." Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi blurted out, "This prince won't allow anyone to touch a single hair on her head." Of course he knew that the spies from northernly country kidnapped Han Yunxi. They didn't want her life, but Han Yunxi had fallen into the hands of those women. How could she not be tortured? That cowardly woman must be scared to death. Hearing His Highness Duke of Qin's words, General Mu was even more stunned. He never expected His Highness Duke of Qin to be so protective of Han Yunxi. For a moment, he didn't dare to speak. It was his son who took her out. If they couldn't find her or something happened to her, then the general's estate wouldn't be able to escape punishment with His Highness Duke of Qin's attitude. "Your Highness, this old official will go to the palace right now and ask His Majesty to transfer troops." General Mu's face was earnest. Searching the mountains required men and horses, so transferring troops was the most effective method. But Long Fei Yi refused. "No need. We can't alarm anyone else about this." Leaving aside the fact that Emperor Tianhui wouldn't agree, Long Fei Yi didn't want to publicize the matter even if he did. This involved the northernly spies, and now the Han family was a suspect. Once the matter was made public, it'd affect his investigation and wouldn't benefit Han Yunxi in the slightest. A complicated look flitted past Long Fei Ye's eyes before he said coldly, "Chu Shifeng, send out all of the solitary enclosure's men and horses to secretly search the mountains for your lordship. Also, take the 2 hostages from the prison cells to the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop." Was His Highness Duke of Qin preparing to exchange hostages? Now General Mu was even more incredulous. After all, His Highness Duke of Qin had never released any of his captives. But this time, he'd made an exception for the sake of a woman. Actually, Han Yunxi's kidnapping was the perfect opportunity for His Highness Duke of Qin to get rid of this Qin Wangfei. Moreover, it involved the northernly spies, so Emperor Tianhui and the Empress Dowager didn't dare to make things difficult for him. Leaving aside General Mu, even Chu Shifeng couldn't understand. But faced with his master in a fit of anger, he didn't dare to ask a single question. He immediately obeyed his orders and left. Long Fei Yi looked icily at the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop servants. "Tell your owner that your lordship wants to see him." Chapter 112. After Han Yunxi's incident, the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop had been sealed off. Outsiders couldn't enter, and the people inside couldn't leave. As soon as Long Fei Yi arrived, Mu Qingguo hurried to see him. Mu Qingguo had been searching since yesterday afternoon, but he couldn't find a single clue. He really didn't have the face to come back, but since His Highness Duke of Qin was here, he had to come back. As soon as he entered, Mu Qingguo immediately knelt. This subordinate didn't protect esteemed Wang Fei well. This subordinate deserves 10,000 deaths. If you're only here to ask for forgiveness, then this prince will sentence you to death right now. Long Fei Yi didn't hold back at all. What was the use of asking for forgiveness now? Mu Qingwu understood, but he still felt very apologetic. What exactly happened? Long Fei Yi asked coldly. General Mu and the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop servants hadn't told him everything. Only the person involved, Mu Qingwu, knew what had happened. Mu Qingwu gave Long Fei Yi a detailed account of why they'd come to the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop, including his suspicions about the Han family's second miss, Han Ruoxue. Since you've already investigated clearly, why did you still come to Nanshan? Long Fei Yi didn't understand. Esteemed Wang Fei said she wanted to pick some red Nanshan to bring back. This subordinate didn't expect this to happen. Mu Qingwu was filled with regret. If he'd known earlier, he would have come himself. Han Yunqi also liked red Nanshan. A complicated look flashed through Long Fei Ye's eyes. He asked, how long did it take you to get from Sinew Courtyard to Nanshan? There were many people lying in ambush at Nanshan. Someone must have known beforehand that Han Yunqi would be there. Long Fei Ye's question was undoubtedly because he suspected there were spies in the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop. The mountain roads are difficult. Less than an hour, Mu Qingwu replied truthfully. Less than an hour was not a short period of time. It was enough for the assassin to set up an ambush. Most importantly, how did a large group of assassins enter the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? It must be known that the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House was not an ordinary tea house. The people who came here were all influential people in the imperial capital. The security here had always been very tight. Right at this moment, Guard Shengguan rushed over. Guard Shengguan couldn't find the Manor Lord no matter how hard he tried. He tried to contact the Manor Lord but to no avail. The Manor Lord had a courtyard on the west mountain of the Heavenly Fragrance Tea Shop. Most of the time, he stayed there. Although the Manor Lord didn't come often, he had been living in the tea house for the past month. The chateau master basically did not care about the affairs of the tea house. Guard Shengguan was a capable person, but now that such a big matter had happened, Guard Shengguan was helpless and could not bear the responsibility. His Highness Duke of Qin had already arrived, but there was still no news of the Manor Lord. Guard Shengguan could only brace himself and enter to meet him. As soon as he entered, he saw Long Fei sitting loftily in his seat, his face as cold as a demon. He felt the pressure of a mountain and quickly fell to his knees. This commoner Shengguan Ming greets your Highness Duke of Qin. Guard Shengguan, this prince remembers that you are not the Manor Lord. Long Fei Yi said that he liked the red south peak from the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. Guard Shengguan had offered it several times in the name of the Manor Lord. Reporting to your Highness Duke of Qin, this subordinate is also looking for the Manor Lord. The Manor Lord's whereabouts have always been uncertain. This subordinate has already used all means of contact to search for him, Guard Shengguan reported truthfully. You can't find the Manor Lord. Long Fei Yi raised his brows and asked in return. These words were too meaningful. Guard Shengguan was greatly alarmed and hurriedly expressed his position. Your Highness Duke of Qin, this commoner can fully represent the Manor Lord and fully cooperate with the investigation. All the guards of the tea house have entered the mountains to search. The tea maids, tea servants, 2 tea masters, and all the guards of the South Mountain have been imprisoned and are awaiting your Highness Duke of Qin's personal interrogation. Guard Shengguan was a smart person. He had long expected that His Highness Duke of Qin would suspect the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. In fact, he had been unable to sleep for an entire night. After thinking about it for an entire night, he also suspected that a spy had infiltrated the tea house. Otherwise, such a large group of assassins wouldn't have been able to silently lay in ambush on the mountainside of the South Mountain. Long Fei Yi seemed satisfied with Guard Shengguan's answer. He stood up and said coldly, interrogate. The mountain had been sealed off. There was no way the assassins could escape this area. On one hand, Long Fei Yi was secretly searching the mountain. On the other hand, he was also waiting for the other party to state their conditions. Taking hostages meant that they had a request. He wasn't afraid of anything else. He was only afraid that the other party wouldn't make a move. As long as the other party made a move and had a request, he would definitely be able to find Han Yunxi. Of course, if they could uncover the Heavenly Fragrance Teahouse's spy, their advantage would be even greater. However, the faster, the better. The longer they delayed, the more Han Yunxi would suffer. Hearing that Long Fei Yi wanted to interrogate, guard Shengwan let out a sigh of relief. Not daring to delay, he hurriedly led the way. Your Highness Duke of Qin, apart from the tea masters and guards of the South Mountain, everyone else is being held separately. The 2 tea boys and 1 tea girl in Fresh Rain Courtyard don't know what happened on the South Mountain, guard Shengwan whispered as he walked quickly. In fact, it wasn't just the tea boys and tea girls in Fresh Rain Courtyard who didn't know what happened on the South Mountain. Apart from the people on the South Mountain, everyone else in the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House also didn't know what had happened. Guard Shengwan had done a good job of keeping secrets. This trick of his was very useful for interrogation. Long Fei Yi made a soft sound of agreement. That handsome face that angered both men and gods was still very, very cold. His facial features seemed to be frozen, making people wonder if this guy had any expression at all. Guard Shengwan stole a few glances at Long Fei Yi. After waiting for a long time and seeing that he didn't speak, he timidly asked, Your Highness Duke of Qin, who do you want to interrogate first? The people from Fresh Rain Courtyard. Long Fei Yi didn't think and directly answered. As soon as Long Fei Yi arrived at the interrogation room, 2 tea boys were brought in. They were both boys in their early teens and were crying all the way in. As soon as they entered and saw the situation in the room, the 2 children were immediately frightened and couldn't help but bawl loudly. Don't cry. Guard Shengwan said angrily. However, the 2 children didn't stop crying. Instead, they cried even louder and huddled together. Guard Shengwan's forehead was beaded with sweat. Actually, according to his understanding, these 2 children shouldn't be a big problem. However, this matter was too risky. His Highness Duke of Qin hadn't interrogated them, so he didn't dare to speak carelessly. He stole a glance at His Highness Duke of Qin. Seeing that His Highness Duke of Qin wasn't moving, he could only pull the 2 children apart and have someone cover their mouths. Once the crying stopped, the room was finally quiet. Don't cry. I'm only going to ask you a few questions. Answer truthfully, or you'll suffer. Guard Shengwan warned. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi suddenly said, There's nothing to ask. If you don't confess, I'll drag you out and bury you. At these words, the 2 children were so frightened that their faces turned white. They had only been crying, but now they started to struggle violently. Guard Shengwan let go of one of the children's mouths. Unexpectedly, the child cried loudly, Wah! I confess. I confess. Confess? He was going to confess. Qin Wangfei's kidnapping on Nanshan hadn't been made public. What did this child know? What was he going to confess? Could it be that he really was a spy? Guard Shengwan and Mu Qingwu looked at each other in disbelief. Long Fei Yi was also somewhat puzzled, but he still didn't say anything. Unexpectedly, the child cried, I confess. I confess. Sister Bai Lu betrayed eldest Miss Mu. Wah, it was Sister Bai Lu who didn't follow the rules. We didn't know anything, wah. This, Guard Shengwan slapped his head in confusion, but Long Fei Yi and Mu Qingwu immediately understood. The tea servant, Bai Lu, had violated the rules and answered many of Mu Qingwu and Han Yunxi's questions. The tea boys had overheard and thought that this was what they were questioning. Long Fei Yi pinched his brows with one hand and waved the other. Without saying anything, he motioned for Guard Shengwan to take the children away. Guard Shengwan was baffled. Mu Qinggu hurried over to explain and personally untied the two tea boys. He said in a low voice, "Take them out and comfort them. Bring the tea servant here." Guard Shengwan finally understood after hearing the explanation. As for why Mu Qinggu and Han Yunxi were investigating Mu Luyue, although he was curious, he didn't dare to ask and quickly sent them away. Once the tea servant, Bai Lu, was taken out of the cell, she couldn't help but tremble. She was flustered and didn't know what had happened on Nanshan. She didn't know why Guard Shengwan had imprisoned her. After receiving Her Highness and the young general yesterday, she went to rest. She originally wanted to secretly dispose of the tin of tea leaves, but who knew that before she could do so, she heard that something had happened on Nanshan. All the entrances to the tea house were sealed. Everyone in the tea house was in a panic. Everyone asked around, but no one knew what had happened on Nanshan. Not long after, the guards rushed into the house and took her away by force. No matter how much she begged or cried, the guards didn't tell her why. Last night, she tossed and turned in bed, unable to sleep. No matter how she thought about it, something was wrong. Other than secretly hiding the tin of spring tea left behind by second young Miss Han, she didn't do anything wrong. However, even if the matter of her stealing the spring tea was discovered, it couldn't have caused such a big commotion and sealed off the entire tea house. It was just a tin of tea leaves. After the Han family came to ask about it last time, they didn't come again. Even before Divine Dr. Han was imprisoned and the Han family was defeated, with the Han family status, it wouldn't be enough for Guard Shengwan to seal off the tea house and search the whole tea house. Bai Lu wasn't an inexperienced tea boy. She had been in the Heavenly Fragrance tea house for nearly 10 years and worked her way up from a tea boy to a tea servant. She was dedicated to serving the rich and powerful. Even if she wasn't smart, she had become smart after hearing so many things. She knew that things weren't that simple. It shouldn't have much to do with that tin of spring tea. However, no matter how much she racked her brains, she still didn't know what wrong she had done to be imprisoned. Other than her, was there someone else who was imprisoned? Were the guards taking her to be interrogated now? Was Guard Shengwan going to interrogate her personally? Would they torture her? But what did they want to interrogate her about? Bai Lu was full of uneasiness. When she saw the interrogation door, she couldn't help but shrink back. She whimpered softly, "My two lords, what exactly is going on?" The guards didn't dare to make a sound and directly dragged Bai Lu in. Bai Lu almost fell. When she steadied herself and looked up, she gasped. She saw a godlike man sitting high up in front of her. His face was as cold as frost, and his whole body exuded the intimidating aura of a king. Bai Lu had seen many rich and powerful people, but she had never seen such a noble and domineering man. She was already flustered, and now her mind was blank. This man, who was he? Suddenly, Guard Shengwan kicked her legs from behind. Bai Lu knelt down abruptly. Only then did she regain her senses and see Guard Shengwan and Mu Qinggu at the side. Guard Shengwan learned from Long Fei Yi and didn't say much. He directly questioned her coldly, "Bai Lu, are you going to confess?" Probing the truth with falsehood, falsehood with falsehood. If Bai Lu was innocent, she wouldn't be able to confess anything even if she wanted to. However, if she knew something, then the result was very exciting. Chapter 113. Confess or not? Hearing this question, Bai Lv's heart skipped a beat. She originally thought that Guard Shengwan would at least say something or ask something. This way, she would know what exactly happened and be able to deal with it. But who knew that guard Shengwan's first sentence would be for her to confess? What did she have to confess? Did they know anything? Other than stealing the tea leaves, what else did she have to confess? Bai LV lowered her head, her heart thumping wildly. She was so nervous. Should she confess? She couldn't help but sneak a glance at the godlike man not far away. Just one glance and she retracted her gaze in horror, her heart almost jumping out of her chest. She didn't know who this man was, but she was certain that this man's identity was very honorable. That was why the young general was waiting so respectfully by the side. Something big must have happened in the tea house. It must have nothing to do with her stealing the tea leaves, right? Are you confessing or not? Guard Shengwan questioned again. I don't know. I don't know anything. Bai LV blurted out. Her mouth reacted faster than her brain. You don't know. I think you won't shed a tear until you see the coffin. Shengwanji was enraged. He pulled out a long whip from the side and swung it in the air. A shio sound was heard. Bai LV jumped in fright and instinctively covered her ears. She shrank to the side and trembled. Her mind was completely blank. How could she care about thinking so much? No matter how smart she was just an ordinary tea servant. Being frightened like this, tears flowed out immediately. She exclaimed, Guard Shengwan, spare me. Spare me. Bai LV, you're a smart woman. You should know that if you confess, you'll be lenient. If you resist, you'll be strict. Guard Shengwan reminded her coldly. Who knew that Bai LV would surrender as soon as he finished speaking? She trembled, her lips and teeth chattering. I confess. I confess, I'll confess everything. Seeing this, Long Fei Ye's gaze turned cold. He finally sized up this tea servant. Speak. Guard Shengwan was nervous. He didn't expect that she would really confess after being forced. Bai Lu's lips trembled as she watched, unable to utter a complete sentence for a long time. Mu Qingwu was burning with anxiety. He strode over and didn't care about the other party's woman. He grabbed Bai Lu's collar and said angrily, Speak. I stole the customer's tea leaves. Bai Lu's words were intermittent, but before she could finish, Mu Qingwu and Guard Shengwan were stunned. Stealing tea leaves. Mu Qingwu released Bai LV in shock. Bai LV could finally breathe normally. She crawled to Guard Shengwan's feet and hugged him tightly, begging, Guard Shengwan, please spare me. I beg you. I'm still hiding that can of tea leaves in my room. It's still unopened. I'll return it to second young Miss Han. I'll go apologize to her. Please spare me. Perhaps, if Bai Lu had been calmer, she would not have confessed. However, how could she remain calm when faced with Guard Shengwan's whip? She had never encountered such a terrifying situation. Her thoughts were in a mess and her mind was blank. She could only confess. Guard Shengwan felt really humiliated. He didn't expect that instead of finding out about the Nanshan incident, he would find out about such a scandal. He shook his head and looked at Bai Lu with furrowed brows. He didn't know what to say. Had he been too busy this year and neglected to discipline this bunch of servants? How embarrassing. Guard Shengwan, spare me, spare me. I won't dare to do it again. I really won't. Guard Shengwan. You, shut up. Guard Shengwan was so angry that he suddenly shouted. Bai Lu was so frightened that she immediately quieted down. Guard Shengwan braced himself and looked timidly at Long Fei Yi. Unexpectedly, Long Fei Yi was interested and asked coldly, you hid second young Miss Han's tea leaves. Bai Lu only felt that this cold voice was deep and husky and rather pleasant to the ear. It was like the sound of a guqin that could tug at one's heartstrings. She was entranced and didn't realize that Long Fei Yi was asking her a question. What are you waiting for? His Highness Duke of Qin is asking you a question. Guard Shengwan rebuked angrily. Only then did Bai Lu snap out of her daze and look at Long Fei Yi in disbelief. His Highness Duke of Qin. Heavens, he was actually His Highness Duke of Qin. No wonder this man was as honorable as the god of the night. His Highness Duke of Qin was a man who existed like a god. Bai Lu was stunned once again. She stared blankly at Long Fei Yi and didn't answer for a long time. This gaze reminded Long Fei Yi of Han Yunxi. Only, that woman's eyes were much prettier. Long Fei Yi was extremely annoyed and his expression grew colder and colder. Mu Qingwu knew his temperament and hurriedly asked, was second young Miss Han's tea leaves meant to be given to Lu Yue? Yes, no. Bai Lu was somewhat incoherent. Is it true or not? Mu Qingwu was annoyed. He thought that His Highness Duke of Qin's hatred for love-struck women was reasonable. This servant isn't sure. Second young Miss Han brought those tea leaves over. She forgot to take them when she left. In the past, she would always give the tea leaves she left there to Miss Mu. This time, she left without giving them away. I don't know if she forgot to give them to her, Bai Lu hurriedly explained. Hearing this, Mu Qingwu was shocked and hurriedly asked, where are they? Afraid that Mu Qingwu wouldn't believe her, Bai Lu emphasized, this servant didn't touch them. They're in this servant's room. Mu Qingwu was both surprised and delighted. He didn't expect to find out something like this. After all, he and esteemed Wang Fei had already given up on finding the poison tea leaves. Who knew that they would find them at this critical juncture? According to their conjecture, the tea leaves that second young Miss Han gave to Lu Yue were most likely poisoned. As long as they could detect the poison in this jar of tea leaves, all the mysteries surrounding the 10,000 snake poison would be easily solved. This accident could be considered a silver lining in the midst of misfortune. Mu Qingwu looked at His Highness Duke of Qin and saw that his complexion was much better than before. Guard Shengwan was listening from the side. Although he didn't know what was going on, he was very quick-witted and immediately ordered someone to find the tea leaves. As for Bai Lu, she was so frightened that she even confessed about the tea leaves. She definitely wasn't a traitor. Guard Shengwan didn't dare to ask His Highness Duke of Qin. He gave Mu Qingwu a look, asking how to deal with her. Lock her up for now and await trial. Mu Qingwu said seriously. He wasn't referring to the kidnapping case, but the 10,000 snake poison case. If the tea leaves were found to be poisoned, Bai Lu would be a witness. Of course, Guard Shengwan didn't know the hidden meaning in his words. Very quickly, the tea leaves that Bai Lu had secretly hidden were found and brought over. It was an oval white porcelain jar about 5 inches tall. There was no label on it and it was sealed very well. Mu Qingwu knew what was going on as soon as he saw the sealed opening. He remembered that Lu Yue had given him many good teas that were sealed like this. Although Mu Qingwu couldn't wait to take the tea leaves to a poisoner for inspection, His Highness Duke of Qin didn't say a word. He could only endure it. After all, finding esteemed Wang Fei was more important. He personally took the jar and checked the seal. After confirming that there were tea leaves inside, he presented it to His Highness Duke of Qin. Guard Shengwan was curious and assumed that His Highness Duke of Qin would say something, but Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. He set the jar of tea leaves aside and rested his slender hand on top of it. His fingers tapped on the lid in a languid, mysterious manner. It was impossible to see through him. After a moment of silence, Long Fei Yi looked at Guard Shengwan. continued the interrogation. Your Highness, the rest of the people are all from the South Mountain. They're all locked up together and were present when esteemed Wang Fei was kidnapped. There was a tea servant who led the way, 2 tea maidens, and 15 guards in charge of the South Mountain area, Guard Shengwan reported. Long Fei Yi thought for a while before handing the jar of tea leaves to Chu Shifeng, who was standing by Yuan's side. Cold, he said, take it back and examine it well. Then he rose to his feet. Since there's so many people, your lordship will go personally. Taking 10,000 steps back, even if the assassins had the skills to hide in the tea plantation, they'd need someone to tip them off. Otherwise, how would they know that Han Yunxi and Mu Qingwu would go to the South Mountain? There had to be a spy among them. He refused to believe that he couldn't find one. While Long Fei Yi was interrogating the culprits himself, the Celestial Fragrance Tea Shop, the General's estate, and the solitary enclosure didn't dare to relax as they searched the barren hills around the tea plantation. But none of them expected the assassins to be hiding in a cave in the middle of the abyss. Han Yunxi lay on the ground, her face pale and covered in sweat. In a daze, she muttered something to herself as if she was having a nightmare. Suddenly, she screamed and sat up abruptly, her eyes opening at the same time. In her dream, she was falling down the abyss until she hit the ground. She woke up with a start and broke out in cold sweat. After calming herself down, Han Yunxi realized that she was in a dark cave. Didn't she fall off the cliff? Didn't she fall to her death? Why was she here? She didn't remember how she fainted. Her memory stopped at the moment when she fell off the cliff. Her professional habit made her look for her medical kit. Luckily, it was still there. Awake! Suddenly, a cold female voice sounded. Han Yunxi felt that the voice was familiar, but she didn't think too much about it and hurriedly turned around. She saw 2 women standing behind her. One was dressed in black with a bandage around her arm. It was the female assassin who kidnapped her. The other was dressed in green with a mask. It was the one who spoke. Although she couldn't see their faces, she could tell that the black-dressed woman was very young and the green-dressed woman wasn't young. She put up her guard and angrily asked, "Who are you people? Why did you kidnap me? You're quite arrogant. This grandaunt hasn't settled the score with you yet." The black-dressed woman angrily walked over. If it wasn't for her master's orders to keep Han Yunxi alive, she would have killed this woman. This slut thought she had some skills in poisoning and dared to poison her. She was simply tired of living. If you have the ability, take off your mask and let this princess consort see what you look like. Otherwise, this princess consort doesn't remember owing you anything. Han Yunxi snorted coldly. You still dare to talk back? The black-dressed woman said as she walked over and suddenly raised her hand to slap her fiercely. Who knew that Han Yunxi raised her hand to block and the poison needle hidden in her hand stabbed into the black-dressed woman's palm. Ah! The black-dressed woman screamed and kicked over, "You slut! If you know what's good for you, then let me go. Otherwise, I guarantee that you will die from the poison within an hour." Han Yunxi said coldly. Even if she had fallen into their hands, she wasn't someone who could be bullied. The black-dressed woman looked at her palm and said disapprovingly, "Just a small poison and you dare to take it out to disgrace yourself." Who knew that Han Yunxi was even more disapproving as she laughed sarcastically, "Just a mere poison man, what's there to be arrogant about?" When these words came out, the black-dressed woman and green-dressed woman were shocked. Han Yunxi actually knew about Poison Man. Chapter 114. Han Yunxi was such a person. Even if she was being trampled underfoot, she was still proud and unyielding, confident and calm. This was because she knew that the person who'd stepped on her would only laugh at her for her lowly status. She wouldn't pity her and let her off just because she begged for mercy. She didn't know why this unfamiliar assassin was so disdainful of her, but she wouldn't let others look down on her so easily. "Who told you I was a poison human?" the assassin asked urgently. Her face was calm, but her heart was filled with shock. After all, the study of poisons in Cloud Realm continent wasn't the orthodox mainstream. Very few people studied them, and the art of nurturing poisons was even rarer known to the public. Very few people understood it. Even if Han Yunxi wasn't useless trash from the Han family, she shouldn't have known. The Han family wasn't familiar with poisons at all. Could it be that she had really underestimated this woman's ability? Han Yunxi's lips curved into a mocking smile as she sized up the assassin, then the green-robed one. "Cold," she said, "it's not like it's anything special. Anyone with eyes can tell that you're a poison human, and so is she." Han Yunxi pointed at the green-robed assassin as she spoke. In Han Yunxi's eyes, that woman was the true expert. "So what? You think a trifling poison can hurt me?" "You're dreaming," the assassin said, glancing at her palm again. Her actions had long betrayed her. If she really didn't care, why bother looking? But Han Yunxi couldn't be bothered to pay her any attention. Instead, she smiled at the green-robed assassin. "She'll definitely die from the poison within an hour. How about we make a bet?" "You!" The assassin was so angry that she raised a leg to kick her. Han Yunxi wanted to dodge, but it was too late. Her shoulder took the full brunt of the kick, sending her sprawling on the ground. It hurt. This woman was a martial artist, so her legs were extraordinarily strong. She, on the other hand, was just a weak woman without the strength to truss up a chicken. However, even though she was lying on the ground, her gaze was still cold and noble. She was clearly looking up at others, but it gave people the illusion that they were being looked down at from above. This made the woman in black very uncomfortable and even inexplicably guilty. She raised her foot again and stopped it above Han Yunxi's face. She threatened, "What poison did you give me? Speak, or I'll ruin your face." "You don't have the right to threaten me. Take your foot away. Otherwise, I won't give you the antidote. I mean what I say." Han Yunxi glanced at him from the corner of her eyes. Cold, she exuded an inviolable majesty. The black-robed female assassin was a poison master and a poison person, so she did not notice the poison in her palm. However, when she saw Han Yunxi's cold and arrogant eyes, she felt an inexplicable sense of fear. An hour was not a long time. He Sha arrived in front of Han Yunxi in 2 or 3 steps. The tip of her sword was against her neck and she roared, "Antidote." Han Yunxi did not want to give it to her. This was her only chance, her only bargaining chip. God knows why these 2 people kidnapped her. "Are you giving it to me or not?" He Sha said sternly. She increased her strength and the tip of her sword really pierced into Han Yunxi's flesh. So painful. Han Yunxi had always been amenable to coaxing but not coercion. She was still hesitating at first, but now she frowned and also refused. She said coldly, "No." He Sha's eyes narrowed into a straight line, exuding a dangerous aura. Because she held her sword too tightly, her whole long sword was trembling. Han Yunxi also narrowed her eyes and stared at her coldly. The 2 confronted each other, and the atmosphere was tense. "He Sha, think carefully. Do you want to go back and lower your head to His Highness, or die here? You only have half an hour." Qing Yi reminded her sternly. Even someone as calm as her was agitated. He Sha's hand slightly stiffened and seemed to be wavering. But who knew that at this moment, Han Yunxi suddenly moved forward and let the tip of the sword pierce deeper. Blood gushed out all of a sudden. He Sha, who was still hesitating, immediately withdrew her long sword. She was so scared that she broke out in a cold sweat. She shouted angrily, Han Yunshi, you lunatic. If you have the guts, kill me. If you don't, then get lost. Han Yunshi said coldly. You. He Sha was speechless. She admitted that she had lost in the end. His Highness had not even subdued Han Yunshi, and she had lost first. Han Yunshi, you win. Sheathing her long sword, He Sha's face was full of unwillingness. She turned and left angrily, disappearing into the cave in an instant. Han Yunshi took out a gauze and covered her neck. Although she fought for a breath, it was a pity that she had no bargaining chip. She never thought that their highness would be nearby. She could see their highness in less than half an hour. With He Sha's speed, half an hour was not too far. Since he was nearby, why didn't he come to meet her? Why did he kidnap her? And how far was this place from Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? Long Fei Yi should know that she was kidnapped, right? Would he come to save her? Or, alright, she herself knew that this was a great opportunity for Long Fei Yi to get rid of his betrothed Qin Wangfei. Seeing Han Yunshi calmly treat her own wound, Qin Yi's eyes flashed with admiration. No wonder Master would risk everything to kidnap this Qin Wangfei. Compared to He Sha, this girl was much more outstanding. Han Yunshi unhurriedly treated her wound, then looked towards Qin Yi. Coldly, she asked, speak. Why did you invite me here? Qin Yi couldn't help but smile at her words. Han Yunshi, who did you learn your poison skills from? If you want to discuss this with me, why don't we return to the Heavenly Fragrance Tea House? We can slowly chat, Han Yunshi replied mildly. You're very smart. Qin Yi wasn't mocking her, but affirming her. You were the one who used the 10,000 snake poison? Han Yunshi seized the chance to ask. Qin Yi didn't answer, but walked towards the entrance of the cave. Han Yunshi immediately followed and asked, how many more people do you have lying in ambush in Tianning? But Qin Yi's mouth was very tight and she still didn't answer. Han Yunshi was about to ask when two black-robed, masked assassins walked in from outside the cave and blocked Han Yunshi's path. You're waiting for someone to come. For your master. Han Yunshi asked again. Unexpectedly, Qin Yi didn't answer, but ordered, tie her up and throw her in the innermost part of the cave. Compared to this green-robed female assassin, Han Yunshi wanted He Sha to stay. This woman was simply airtight. She couldn't get anything out of her, nor could she find a chance to escape. Very quickly, she was tied up and thrown into the innermost part of the cave. What was Qin Yi waiting for? Chapter 115. The sky outside gradually darkened and Han Yunshi curled up in a corner. For the entire afternoon, Qin Yi didn't even look at her once, let alone speak to her. This made Han Yunshi even more certain that Qin Yi was waiting. Perhaps waiting for something to happen, or perhaps waiting for someone to come. Han Yunshi didn't know how long she had been unconscious for and could only tell if it was day or night from the sky outside the cave. On the day she and Mu Qingwu went to Heavenly Fragrance Tea Shop, there were still 12 days before the agreed time of the bet. If she had been unconscious for 2 to 3 days, including today, wouldn't it be 3 to 4 days? Then the remaining time was only 7 to 8 days. 7 to 8 days wasn't long, but it wasn't short either. As for the 10,000 snake poison case, currently she had only confirmed the suspect and hadn't obtained any substantial evidence. She didn't know if Long Fei Yi had found anything from the Han family's third household. If her direction was wrong, if she still hadn't found the culprit by the agreed time, then wouldn't she really lose to Mu Liyue? If she lost, she would have to strip and walk through the streets. Thinking of this, Han Yunshi was depressed. Losing was one thing, but to have all her hard work go to waste was even more depressing. The more she thought, the tighter her brows knitted. But, after a while, it suddenly loosened and she pouted and exhaled a mouthful of turbid air with a helpless expression. All right, she wasn't even sure if she could go back, yet she was still thinking about the bet. Thinking of this, she drooped her head and sighed in her heart. If only she knew martial arts, that would be great. At least she would have a chance of survival and wouldn't be so passive every time. Han Yunxi didn't know how rich the changes in her expression were when she was thinking about these things. However, the person hiding in the stone wall at the side was watching with great interest. Hey! Hey, Poison Lass! Poison Lass! Han Yunxi was immersed in her own thoughts when she suddenly heard a voice. She immediately focused her attention and listened seriously. She realized that there seemed to be someone talking to her. This way. To the right, hee. To the right. Suddenly, the voice became much louder and Han Yunxi immediately looked to the right. Other than a stone wall, she didn't see anything else. Silly girl. The voice was filled with a playful laughter, and it seemed to have come from the stone wall. Strange. Han Yunxi's line of sight searched the stone wall. Very quickly, she saw a small hole in the stone wall. In the small hole, there was a pair of long and flirtatious eyes staring at her. Han Yunxi was so shocked that she almost screamed. Luckily, she held it in. That pair of eyes blinked a few times, revealing a playful smile as it expressed its goodwill to her. Is it someone you know? Han Yunxi remembered that among the people she knew, no one had such flirtatious and beautiful peach blossom eyes. Although the hole was very small and there was no way to see the eyes clearly, Han Yunxi was still very sure. Who was it? She calmed herself down and looked warily at the entrance of the cave. The black-clothed masked assassin in the cave had already left. Qing Yi was sitting alone at the entrance of the cave with her back facing her. She was a little far away, so she didn't notice the commotion here. Don't worry, she can't hear us. The man said in a low voice. Even his voice was filled with laughter, and he seemed to be in a good mood. Han Yunxi turned around and looked at that pair of eyes warily. She asked in a low voice, I don't know you, right? It's fine as long as I know you. The man smiled. Then who are you? Han Yunxi asked while thinking that there must be a cave behind this stone wall. That person should be next door. The person who came to save you. The man said and seemed to take a step back. Han Yunxi vaguely caught a glimpse of his nose. It was especially tall and beautiful. Long and narrow peach blossom eyes, a high nose bridge, and if he had sexy thin lips, wouldn't he be a handsome man? Of course, Han Yunxi wasn't in the mood to think about these at this moment. She was very sure that she had never seen this guy before. Brother, it's not very appropriate to keep me in suspense at this time. She said mildly and shifted her position to face the wall. It's pretty good. I don't plan to save you now. Since I have nothing to do, let's have a chat. The man's smile was especially charming. He was lazy and leisurely, not at all like he was in deep danger. He was obviously flirting with her. Han Yunxi couldn't help but roll her eyes. She simply turned her head away and ignored him. She thought that this guy was probably just passing by to buy soy sauce, right? Unexpectedly, Han Yunxi waited for a long time, but the man didn't continue to speak. She hurriedly turned her head and saw that the small cave was empty. There was nothing there. It can't be. Was he really just here to buy soy sauce? Hey! Hey, are you still there? Han Yunxi hurriedly asked. It wasn't easy for someone to come. No matter what, it was a chance to escape. Hey! Are you still there? Helpless, Han Yunxi asked a few times, but there was no response from the other side. Han Yunxi panicked. She glanced at the cave entrance. Seeing that Qing Yi didn't move, she carefully shifted her position to the side of the stone wall. Through the small cave, she could faintly see that there really was a cave next door. However, there wasn't a single person in sight. Are you there? If you're there, just squeak. Han Yunxi felt a little helpless. However, just as she finished speaking, a squeak suddenly came from the other side. Han Yunxi was stunned. Then, she was overjoyed. Hey, you're still there. My name isn't Hey. My name is Gu. His voice was very low, so Han Yunxi couldn't hear him clearly. Hey, what did you say? My name isn't Hey. My name is Gu. That person repeated himself again, as if he was deliberately lowering his voice. This time, Han Yunxi heard him. She was shocked. What? Gucci Shaw. She heard a light chuckle from the other side. She wasn't sure if that person heard Han Yunxi's words. He repeated himself again, but his voice was much clearer. My name isn't Hey. My name is Gu. This time, Han Yunxi finally heard him clearly. Gu. These three words sounded very similar to Gu Qi Sha. No wonder she heard wrongly. However, Gu was just a name and not his real name. In any case, she hadn't heard of it before and didn't know who it was. After confirming that the person was there, Han Yunxi shifted her position with difficulty. Her back was facing the wall so that she looked a little more normal. Not long after she sat down, Qing Yi turned around to look at her. Han Yunxi didn't move. She didn't avoid her gaze and looked back at her from afar. Qing Yi looked at her for a moment but didn't say anything. Then, she turned her head back. Han Yunxi secretly sighed. She didn't dare to speak immediately. After waiting for a while and seeing that Qing Yi didn't turn around, she said in a low voice, Hey, why did you save me? My name isn't Hey. If you don't mind, you can call me Shao Qi. A teasing laughter sounded, causing Han Yunxi to feel a chill. A grown man called Shao Qi. She thought that the guy next door must be a show-off. Next door, Gu was sitting with his back against the wall just like Han Yunxi. However, he wasn't sitting upright like Han Yunxi. Instead, he was languid and relaxed. He was like a cat basking in the sun in winter, languid to the bone. He wore a fiery red robe with wide sleeves that covered the floor luxuriously. His hand casually rested on one of his legs. His 5 fingers were slender and fair. His skin was paler than a normal person's and looked so delicate that it could be broken by the slightest breeze. He smiled lightly, his breath like orchids. His face was so beautiful that it made the world lose its light. Those eyes were so seductive that it could make one's soul melt. Why did you save me? Next door, Han Yunxi asked again. Because I like you. Gu answered so naturally, as if he was joking. Han Yunxi seemed to have gotten used to his teasing. She pretended not to hear him and asked again patiently, Then when do you plan to save me? In a few days, Gu said again. She didn't know if he was being perfunctory or if he had really calculated the time. Han Yunxi wasn't willing to give up and continued to ask, Then how many days later? However, this time, Gu didn't answer. Instead, he asked, Does your neck still hurt? Then how many days later? Han Yunxi continued. Poison girl, where did you learn your poison skills from? How are you so good? Is your master still around? Gu continued to ask. Seeing this, a young guard who was queuing at the front of the queue immediately knelt down and prostrated himself on the ground, crying out loud, I don't know anything. I really don't know. Guard Shengwan, I'm getting married at the end of the month, please let me go. I'm begging you. Guard Shengwan hesitated. If this interrogation continued, more innocent people would die. He looked at His Highness Duke of Qin, but His Highness Duke of Qin didn't react at all. Left with no choice, Guard Shengwan could only forcefully drag him over. Unexpectedly, at this moment, someone suddenly rushed out from the back of the crowd and shouted, "Enough, stop the interrogation, I confess. I confess." Chapter 116. Finally, someone couldn't help but stand up. If Long Fei Yi was certain that there was a traitor among them, then there had to be. Only then did his cold and calm eyes slowly move towards the person who rushed out. He saw that it was a middle-aged man, and based on his attire, he didn't look like an ordinary guard. "Huiyang, so it's you." Guard Shengwan was astonished. This fellow was the head of the South Mountain Guards and a candidate for the next leader position. He'd personally promoted him to be a capable subordinate, so how could he be a spy? Huiyang looked at Guard Shengwan and lowered his head in remorse. Mu Qingguo immediately stepped forward to hold him down. "How did you ambush them? Where are they?" Long Fei Yi asked coldly, finally interrogating them personally. "Those people have been lying in ambush in the South Mountain for a long time. They didn't come for esteemed Wang Fei, since Huiyang had stood up, it meant that he was prepared to die." There was nothing to fear, but Long Fei Yi's icy eyes made him timid. He paused before continuing. They came here specifically to wait for His Majesty. I don't know why, but as soon as they heard esteemed Wang Fei was coming up the mountain, they made a move against her. Guard Shengwan suddenly grew angry. "All right, Huiyang, how long have you been lying in ambush? How did you lure them in?" Over the past few years, Emperor Tianhui would personally go to the fragrant tea plantation to pick tea leaves. He'd hide his identity and visit incognito, but Guard Shengwan had always received him personally. Thus, Guard Shengwan had been strengthening the South Mountain's defenses. It's been more than half a year. They've been lying in ambush nearby, so they'll be here soon, Huiyang answered truthfully. He didn't even have the face to look at Guard Shengwan as he fell to his knees. "Guard Shengwan, I've failed to live up to your expectations. I was forced to do this. They kidnapped my old mother, so I had no choice." Hearing this, Guard Shengwan lost his temper and kicked him viciously. "Only you have an old mother. So many brothers died today. Who doesn't have a mother? You son of a bitch." Huiyang was a squad leader. With him as a spy, it'd be much easier for the assassins to avoid the guards and enter the South Mountain. Moreover, Huiyang would be the first to know who was going up the mountain to pick tea. People from northernly country. Long Fei Yi narrowed his eyes dangerously. He did not expect that those spies would even list the emperor as a target for assassination. Wasn't northernly going overboard this time? I don't know who those people are. The one I met was a woman. She was in the cave on the easternmost cliff of Nanshan Hill. Those assassins usually hide there. With their speed, it would only take them 2 cups of tea's time to get here. Huiyang answered truthfully. At first, he was hoping for a fluke, but when he saw the rat torture, he was scared. However, when he saw his brothers die one by one, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Upon hearing this, Long Fei Yi stood up and asked coldly, "She's been kidnapped there too?" Huiyang was so scared that he trembled and stammered, This servant doesn't know. If they can't go down the mountain, they can only hide there." Without another word, Long Fei Yi turned and left. Mu Qingguo also hurriedly chased after him. Guard Shengwan looked at Huiyang, so angry that he couldn't speak. After a while, he said coldly, "Men, lock him up." As he spoke, he also hurriedly chased after him. When he reached the door, he didn't forget to say, "Continue to look for the owner, continue to look for her." He prayed that esteemed Wang Fei must be in the cave. Otherwise, Heavenly Fragrance Tea House would be doomed with such a spy. At this time, the sky outside was already slightly bright and the cold wind was bone-chilling. Only the heavens knew how fast Long Fei Yi was. Even Mu Qinggu could not catch up, let alone guard Shengguan. Saving people was a matter of minutes. If His Highness Duke of Qin was faster, esteemed Wang Fei would suffer less. However, when they reached the easternmost cliff of Nanshan Hill, they saw His Highness Duke of Qin standing at the edge of the cliff. He did not go down. Was His Highness Duke of Qin waiting for them? That was what Mu Qinggu thought, but he quickly rejected the idea. It was very likely that his and guard Shengguan's martial arts combined could not compare to His Highness Duke of Qin. His Highness Duke of Qin had never needed help. As soon as guard Shengguan arrived, he immediately reported, "Your Highness, this is the easternmost cliff." "What's down there?" Long Fei Yi asked. This place was already 2 mountains away from Heavenly Fragrance Tea House. Guard Shengguan rarely came here, so he was not familiar with the surrounding environment. He looked down and saw that the bottom of the cliff was covered in fog. Visibility was very low, and the fog seemed to be a little dark due to the lack of light. "The morning fog hasn't dissipated yet, right?" Guard Shengguan said, then muttered to himself, "But this fog seems to be black." Mu Qinggu also looked down, but he insisted, "This is miasma." If Long Fei Yi had not experienced the poisonous mosquito swarm, perhaps he would also think that this was miasma. However, after that experience, Long Fei Yi was very sure that the black mass in the abyss was the poisonous mosquito swarm, and the scale was even larger than the previous one. However, he could not be sure if these poisonous mosquito swarm were being controlled by someone to guard this place, or if they had gathered together due to time and climate changes. "Who came here before?" Long Fei Yi asked. Mu Qinggu and guard Shengguan were both confused, but they did not dare to ask. Guard Shengguan hurriedly replied, "Hui Yang knows this place, so he should have been here before." "Bring him here," Long Fei Yi said coldly. His icy voice hid his anger, and only the heavens knew when it would explode. After guard Shengguan left, Mu Qinggu asked in a low voice, "Your Highness, could it be that it's not miasma? Poisonous mosquito swarm?" Long Fei Yi's gaze fell on the black fog in the abyss, and his brows were slightly solemn. Faced with the poisonous mosquito swarm, all the poison masters under his command were helpless, and only Han Yunxi could do something about it. Unfortunately, the person he wanted to save now was her. This damned woman, why did she go up the mountain to pick tea for no reason? Poisonous mosquito swarm, this. Mu Qinggu was shocked. Unexpectedly, just as they were talking, the black fog in the abyss suddenly began to float up, and as it floated up, it continued to spread in all directions. Was someone controlling the poisonous mosquito swarm? Was the person hiding in the abyss trying to escape? Long Fei Yi's gaze suddenly turned cold, and he was ready to fight. However, the situation quickly exceeded his imagination. The venomous mosquito swarm spread out faster and faster. Soon, they filled up the entire abyss. Moreover, they continued to spread out in all directions, spreading to the few forests in the surroundings. Long Fei Yi and Mu Qinggu could only retreat again and again, climbing to a high place to look down. As the sky became brighter and the light became stronger, they could also see more clearly. Looking down from above, they saw that the poisonous mosquito swarm was like a huge sea of dark clouds, surging and billowing, gradually enveloping the surrounding forests. Guard Shengguan rushed over with Hui Yang in tow, and when the two saw this scene, they were both shocked and dumbfounded. Hui Yang's face was pale, and he immediately shouted, "Go! Masters, hurry up and leave. This is the outbreak of the poisonous miasma. It will erupt once every 10 years, I saw it when I was young." All the surrounding mountains will be enveloped, hurry up and run. Once you come into contact with this thing, you will be poisoned to death. Originally there. Long Fei Yao was very surprised, and immediately asked, how many mountains will it endanger? How long will it last? Hui Yang gestured, the surrounding area is all in danger, and soon the entire mountain will be covered in poisonous miasma. It will only disperse at noon tomorrow at the earliest. As soon as he said this, Long Fei Yi immediately understood. This large-scale poisonous mosquito swarm was not controlled by humans, but it could still be used by others. The people who kidnapped Han Yunxi were all people who knew how to use poison, so naturally they were not afraid of the poisonous mosquito swarm. Now all the mountain passes would be sealed, and there were 3 groups of people searching the mountain. The assassins did not dare to show themselves because they were afraid, and did not dare to blackmail him with conditions. Without a doubt, they wanted to escape unscathed, and then come back to negotiate with him. And this outbreak of poisonous mosquito swarm was the best opportunity for them to escape in the chaos. This matter was troublesome. Long Fei Yi looked at the black mosquito swarm that was growing larger and larger, his handsome brows tightly knitted together. Poison attacks were his only weakness. Hui Yang stood to the side and watched the poisonous miasma continue to spread. He was terrified, and wanted to speak several times, but did not dare. Finally, Mu Qingwu and guard Shengwan could not hold it in anymore. Your Highness, let's retreat. Mu Qingwu said seriously. Guard Shengwan then dared to take the opportunity to speak, Your Highness, if we don't retreat now, it will be too late. They kidnapped the Princess Consort, so they must have a request. This matter should be discussed at length. Long Fei Ye's fists in his sleeves were tightly clenched. He was so close to being poisoned again. All his failures were because of poison. Very good. He would retreat. He would wait and see how far these spies could escape. Retreat. Long Fei Yi said coldly, and turned to leave. Mu Qingwu and the others did not dare to stay any longer, and hurriedly followed. At this time, the poisonous mosquito swarm had already covered the mountains and plains. Han Yunxi was dragged to the entrance of the cave by Qing Yi. Seeing the densely packed mosquito swarm in front of her, she could not help but suck in a breath of cold air. There were so many of them, it was too scary. You. Impossible, you can't control them. Han Yunxi shook her head. Such a large poisonous mosquito swarm could not be controlled by humans. Even if the climate and terrain were used, it would not be possible. Qing Yi smiled coldly, yes, the person who can control the poisonous mosquito swarm is already dead. Han Yunxi was shocked when she heard this. Last time, she was the one who helped Long Fei Yi kill the female spy. Qing Yi obviously did not know about this. Han Yunxi was not stupid enough to take the initiative to say it. She finally understood what Qing Yi was waiting for. This is natural. You are waiting for this opportunity. You want to take advantage of the chaos to escape. Qing Yi looked over. Suddenly, she grabbed Han Yunxi's chin and stuffed a pill into her mouth. Han Yunxi did not expect this and swallowed it immediately. Don't worry, it will protect your life. Qing Yi snorted. Han Yunxi knew another piece of information. This woman knew the antidote for the poisonous mosquito swarm, which meant that she knew how to raise poisonous mosquitoes. Last time, the female spy who controlled the poisonous mosquitoes was called Sister Wen. Long Fei Yi forced out information from the captives that this Sister Wen was the leader of all the female spies. This meant that Qing Yi was Sister Wen's direct superior. In other words, the person in charge of all the spies in northernly country was Qing Yi. The poison that Mu Qingwu planted must have been concocted by you. Han Yunxi said coldly. She was very sure. She had fought with Sister Wen before. Sister Wen could not possibly concoct the 10,000 snake poison. However, Qing Yi had this ability. Han Yunxi, being too smart is not a good thing for a woman. Qing Yi reminded coldly. Han Yunxi did not reply, but her eyes flashed. She thought she could not find the person who directly poisoned Mu Qingwu. However, if she found the person who concocted the poison, it could be considered as finding the murderer, right? Qing Yi. This princess has taken a liking to you. At this time, a man in black flew out from the poisonous mosquito swarm and reported respectfully, Sister Qing, the northwest direction. We can go now. Qing Yi nodded. She grabbed Han Yunxi and flew down. At the moment of falling, Han Yunxi saw a flash of red at the entrance of the cave. That guy Gu, wasn't he afraid of poison? Chapter 117. Han Yunxi caught a glimpse of a red figure, then she couldn't see the person anymore. At the same time, Qing Yi grabbed her and flew towards the northern mountain range. There were poisonous mosquitoes all over the mountain. It could even be said that the air was filled with poisonous mosquitoes. At this time, even if the people searching the mountain had the courage to continue, they would be poisoned to death very quickly. This group of assassins basically didn't stop them and their journey was smooth, but their speed was slightly slower. Han Yunxi also didn't struggle. She was entangled with one thing. Who exactly was that fellow Gu? Wasn't he afraid of the poisonous mosquitoes? Could it be that he had the antidote? If he had the antidote, he would have already guessed that there were poisonous mosquitoes here. Because the antidote for the poisonous mosquitoes wasn't that easy to find. Thinking of this, Han Yunxi couldn't help but look around. Unfortunately, there was a dense mass of black everywhere. Even the trees couldn't be seen clearly, not to mention the hidden people. Was that guy following them around? Earlier in the cave, there was such a good opportunity, but he didn't make a move. Once the assassins escaped from this mountain, it would be even harder to save people. Gu, was he really here to save her? With a stomach full of doubts, Han Yunxi didn't dare to pin her hopes on a stranger. She had to save herself. Where exactly are you bringing me to? She questioned loudly. Qing Yi glanced over and didn't say a word. You should at least tell me. Are you bringing me to see your lord? Han Yunxi probed again. Unfortunately, this Qing Yi was very calm and had a completely different temperament from that He Sha. It was harder than ascending to the heavens to get any clues from her mouth. Not saying it right. If you don't say it, you'll regret it. Han Yunxi thought hatefully. Seeing that everything around her was getting darker and darker, she simply closed her eyes. In just a moment, a colorless and odorless medicinal powder appeared in her palm. Although her hands were tied and unable to move, but her detoxification system was connected to her brain. Her soul, or rather consciousness, could completely override the detoxification system. With just a thought, she opened the detoxification system and the medicinal powder that she wanted appeared in her hands. Of course, taking this kind of small powder didn't require much mental strength. If he took a larger medicine or a medicine that was stored in the detoxification system, he would have to spend more energy. He couldn't get it just by thinking about it. If Qing Yi knew that she was the one who had helped Long Fei Yi kill Sister Wen who could control poisonous mosquitoes, perhaps Qing Yi would be more prepared. Unfortunately, she didn't know anything. Compared to He Sha, she did not look down on Han Yunxi. However, she still underestimated her. Han Yunxi could disperse and kill the poisonous mosquitoes, so she also had a way to attract them. The powder in her hand was called mosquito coil. This mosquito repellent incense was not the mosquito repellent incense used in modern times. It was a mosquito repellent incense used to attract poisonous mosquitoes. As long as she released it, the poisonous mosquitoes would definitely be attracted. Holding the powder tightly, Han Yunxi slowly opened her eyes. A trace of craftiness flashed across her clear and bright eyes. She carefully released the powder between her fingers and let it flow out a little. Very quickly, the poisonous mosquitoes surrounded them. Luckily, Tsing Yi's speed was fast. Otherwise, Han Yunxi's hand would definitely be bitten full of holes. During the flight, Han Yunxi tried hard to look behind her from the corner of her eyes. She saw a group of poisonous mosquitoes gathering behind her. It was so densely packed that it was scary. If someone with trypophobia saw this scene, they would immediately go crazy. Han Yunxi immediately kept the medicinal powder back into the detoxification system. Luckily, otherwise, if she attracted the poisonous mosquitoes, she would also go crazy. Tsing Yi was seriously avoiding the branches and shuttling through the forest. She didn't notice the abnormality behind her. Very quickly, they were far away from the group of poisonous mosquitoes. Han Yunxi secretly sighed and her lips curled into a bright smile. After giving it a try, the effect of this medicinal powder was pretty good. Attracting the poisonous mosquitoes was also particular about the timing and method. At this moment, the entire mountain was filled with poisonous mosquitoes. If she released the powder, not only would it attract trouble, it would also arouse Tsing Yi's vigilance. She was waiting for the best opportunity. A group of black-clothed masked assassins were leading the way. Tsing Yi pulled Han Yunxi and followed behind. Although they had the antidote, but as the sky became darker and darker, they had no choice but to slow down as they walked in the poisonous mosquitoes. Time passed by slowly and the sky was about to turn dark. At this moment, the people who were searching the mountain had all retreated. All the mountain pass's defenses had also been removed. This meant that Long Fei Yi had given up. However, he still stood on the highest peak of this mountain range, overlooking the mountains. Looking down from such a high place, he could only see a layer of faint black fog pervading the mountains. As the sky darkened, it became more and more unclear. Your Highness, the poisonous mosquitoes have already spread out from all the mountain passes. In some places, they've spread for several li. Guard Shengwan hurried over to report. He had originally wanted to expand the encirclement, hoping that perhaps he could still encircle the assassins. However, now that the poisonous miasma had spread to the foot of the mountain, this method of encirclement was no longer feasible. This seemed to be within Long Fei Ye's expectations. He didn't say anything. His deep eyes were like the sea, hiding the shadows of the mountains within. No one could tell what he was thinking. Seeing that His Highness Duke of Qin didn't reply, Guard Shengwan resentfully glanced at Mu Qingwu. Mu Qingwu frowned and tried to persuade, Your Highness, the poisonous miasma won't disperse until tomorrow afternoon. Let's go back first. He thought that when His Highness said to retreat, it meant to give up on the pursuit and wait for the assassins to come and demand a ransom. He didn't expect that when His Highness said to retreat, it was only for his brothers to retreat. Based on the current situation, His Highness had no intention of giving up. But even if they didn't give up, would they still be able to find the culprit? After all, this area was surrounded by barren mountains with plenty of ferocious beasts and poisonous insects. Swamps were everywhere as well. Emperor Tianhui had once considered the safety of Tianning's capital city and sent troops to explore this area. Unfortunately, he'd always retreated in the face of difficulties and could only station troops to guard the outskirts. Once the culprit escaped into the depths of the mountains, it'd be impossible to find him again. All of you can withdraw, Long Fei Yi finally spoke up, his voice even colder than the winds at the peak of the mountain. Even Mu Qingwu didn't dare open his mouth to speak due to the faint coldness that kept him at arm's length. He shot a look at Guard Shengwan before the two of them left resentfully. After nightfall, the mountains were even more dangerous. Moreover, they couldn't see anything from here. What was the point of waiting here? What's wrong with His Highness? Guard Shengwan didn't understand. Victory and defeat were common occurrences in war. The assassins had only kidnapped the culprit without discussing any terms. It was still unknown who would win in the end. With His Highness Duke of Qin's personality, he shouldn't be reacting like this, right? Moreover, the culprit wasn't anyone important. Wasn't it just Qin Wangfei? A woman who wasn't even welcomed into the gates by His Highness Duke of Qin himself. Maybe he's worried about esteemed Wangfei. Alright, Mu Qinggu couldn't believe his own words. Guard Shengwan's eyes widened at his words, his expression incredulous. He'd only seen His Highness Duke of Qin so angry because of the assassin's arrogance, not because he was worried about esteemed Wangfei. Young General, this, Guard Shengwan was about to speak when Mu Qingwu waved a hand to stop the topic. Actually, he wasn't sure either. That night, neither Guard Shengwan nor Mu Qingwu dared to sleep. They waited for His Highness Duke of Qin to return, but he didn't come back even after daybreak. Huiyang hadn't lied. This massive outbreak of mosquitoes had lasted the entire night and showed no signs of dispersing even after daybreak. It looked like they wouldn't disperse until noon. The golden rays of the rising sun shone on Long Fei Ye's frosty face. He narrowed his eyes slightly and elegantly raised a hand to block the sunlight. Less than 2 hours later, the sun rose and shone brightly over the entire mountain forest. Overlooking the mountains at this time was a completely different scene compared to yesterday evening. At this time, it was obvious where the mosquito swarms were denser and where they were thinner. Long Fei Ye's cold gaze swept over every inch of the mountain forest, as if he was searching for something. Guard Shengwan and Mu Qinggu had arrived a long time ago. They sat off to the side and watched, not daring to disturb him. Finally, when it was close to noon, the sunlight became more and more intense. The dark patches in the mountain forest began to fade and the mosquito swarms began to disperse. Xing Yi and the others had long since abducted Han Yunxi and left the mountains that very night. They headed all the way north and entered an even more desolate mountain wilderness. There were no more mosquitoes around them. At this time, Xing Yi handed Han Yunxi over to the black-clothed masked assassin. She washed her face by a small stream and drank water. Han Yunxi glanced at the sky and a sly smile appeared on her lips. She knew that this natural climate would cause the mosquito swarms to gather. At this time, the mosquitoes would begin to disperse. The time had come. She raised her head and faced the wind. Finding the direction of the wind, she released the medicinal powder that she had been holding tightly in her hand. Very quickly, the powder drifted southward with the wind. It was silent, colorless, and odorless. After washing up, Xing Yi walked over and used a lotus leaf to scoop some water to feed Han Yunxi. Han Yunxi didn't refuse and thanked her. Xing Yi didn't say anything. When she finished drinking, she grabbed her by the arm and prepared to leave. "Can you at least let me drink a few more mouthfuls?" Han Yunxi asked pitifully. "We can't stay here for long." Xing Yi replied coldly. She had been on high alert all this time because her opponent was the terrifying Duke of Qin of Tianing. She naturally didn't dare to lower her guard against a duke that even her master feared. "Just drink a few more mouthfuls of water. It won't take long. If I die of thirst, you guys..." Before Han Yunxi could finish speaking, Xing Yi ruthlessly dragged her away without another word. Han Yunxi's little face sank. She wasn't going to give her time, was she? Then she could only play Mingliao. Xing Yi dragged Han Yunxi along. From time to time, they would borrow strength from rocks and trees to shuttle through the forest at high speed. Han Yunxi's hand kept spilling medicinal powder, which was carried by the wind behind them. Everything was carried out silently. As more and more medicinal powder was blown away into the forest, the poison mosquitoes that were about to disperse sensed the fragrance. At first it was just a few, but soon it grew into a swarm. Gradually, it grew into a large swarm. They gathered together and fought to be the first to snatch the medicinal powder particles in the air. These medicinal powder particles were absolutely attractive to the poison mosquitoes, so much so that it would cause them to fight and kill each other. Long Fei Yi stood high on the peak of a mountain, watching the gradually dispersing shadows and the clear forest. Soon enough, he noticed a new swarm of shadows gathering in the north. Ling Yi's lips curled into a perfect arc. His cold face finally broke into a smile. Very good, Han Yunxi. You really didn't disappoint your lordship. Long Fei Yi didn't say a word. Hands behind his back, he lightly tapped the ground with the tips of his feet and flew off the cliff. His figure was graceful and nimble as he headed towards the black shadows in the north. Your Highness! Mu Qingwu cried out in alarm, springing to his feet. The poison miasma hasn't completely dispersed yet. Guard Shengguan was frightened as well.